Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of What If Deku Slipped Between Worlds? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A long time before, or maybe a long time after quirks were introduced into the gene pool, there was another type of power. Those who had it called it one of two names. Stepping, with nomad being the most popular term to describe someone with that ability, but the curse was also pervasive. Honestly, both made sense when you were not set in any one dimension and timeline. Thankfully, the power was relatively rare. Only one or two people out of each timeline and dimension had the power to step. One such person was Midoriya Izumi, who wasn't sure of her position on the whole thing. Yes, it was cool that she could essentially travel through dimensions and timelines like a cheesy sci-fi character. But the things she saw, the things that she did, Izumi was never sure if she should be having a mental breakdown or praying to whatever gods or goddesses or deities that were out there for mercy. So the girl did something else entirely. Midoriya Izumi swore that she would never tell anyone who was not a nomad like her what she was. Even though Anchors has been designed to help nomads control their stepping, most didn't leave their chosen dimension. And those who did often popped around for a specific reason, not to admire the other realities. And so Midoriya Izumi was alone in her love of the possibilities of what could be. However, she did not allow that love to consume her life. She was a smart kid and insisted on seeming as normal as possible. She knew that if her stepping was discovered, she would never be left alone. She would either be experimented on or forced to become a hero. Izumi had seen that song and dance 1,000 times before, in so many different times and places. The girl did not want to be a character in that drama herself. She had always taken precautions. Izumi never stepped in public, never pushed her hand into that soft barrier that separated all that was from all that could be when others were in view. Her one mistake had been small. When Anchors had been discovered, it had been decided that the makers would make each nomad specify what they wanted their anchor types to be. Izumi had been about 7 or so and was in an "I like pretty rocks and gems" stage. So she decided she wanted to have her favorite gem, a green diamond, to be her primary anchor. The designers could not convince her otherwise, so now she had a fist-sized green diamond on her back. It wasn't fused to her spine or anything. It was simply there and kept her from going to what was not here. Unless Izumi wanted to, of course. Izumi cursed quietly under her breath. She had promised to meet Korba at the intersect, and she was running late. Her footsteps pounded the cement, beating a frantic tempo as she ran to her regular spot. Dang it. I knew I shouldn't have stayed up so late last night. This is what happens if you don't get your caffeine fix, Izumi. She slid around a corner, dashing down the street to a dilapidated part of Mizudafu. It had been wrecked a long time ago in a villain fight, and the city had never gotten around to fixing it. Izumi ran into an alley, desperately looking around. She knew that there were no cameras in this part of town, but she needed to be sure that there were no people. Upon seeing none, the tiny greenette exhaled. She looked around one last time and relaxed. Izumi let herself feel the heavy knot weight of everything pressing around her, the thrum and rumble of distant worlds and universes living and dying. She concentrated and stepped. The boundary between realities always had felt kinda weird to Izumi. It gave resistance like you were moving through honey, and it felt like she was snapped out like a RBB band when she left. It could be worse though. Korba said it felt like they were getting electrocuted when they passed through it, which was a very good reason to why they seldom stepped. Apparently, every nomad felt something different when they went through the barrier, which could also be another reason why so few nomads stepped. Where she came out was nothing like where she left. Where there had been dirty brick walls, cracked pavement, and litter, there was now what could only be described as a rush. Colors of every kind streamed around a pavilion of sorts, causing a bubble effect around the structure. An unconscious smile tugged at Izumi's lips. No matter how many times she saw this place, the intersect, she never went blind to the wonder it was. I wish cameras worked here. Maybe it's a side effect of radiation or stray energy, or whatever the heck the barrier is made up of makes this a camera kill zone. She muttered. She ran into the intersect, hoping Korba decided to be patient. Please, please, please let them be here, she thought. The intersect's glass windows showed the beauty of the cacophony of colors outside, illuminating the interior of the building as well. Some nomads had decided to take up residence here when this pocket dimension was first discovered and had built the intersect to be both a meeting place and a home to those who needed it. The part that Izumi and Korba had arranged to meet in was more of a meeting place than home, but it still resonated within the core of whoever entered that this was a safe area. It felt like a haven. Oh, thank heavens they stayed, Izumi squeaked as she tried to catch her breath. Her green hair, amassed into 2 giant twists on either side of her head, shook as she slowly walked over to where Korba sat. The being sat quietly at a small, low-set table made from hewn stone, legs folded beneath them. They turned as they heard Izumi approach, smiling gently. It is good to see you again, Zuzu. I trust you have been successful in your ventures. Their ink-like black hair drifted around their cheeks as they spoke, illuminating the pale blue of their skin and feather-like eyelashes around their solidly red eyes which searched Izumi's face. I have, for the most part. Izumi replied, embarrassed as she shifted in place. I managed to test out of high school so I do not have to go to an ordinary high school before attending college. I also set up a deal with Yoshikawa-san regarding engineering supplies to my home. However, Korba prodded gently, their tone quiet. There is the fact that I am quirkless, Korba. My reality focuses on quirks much more than character or intelligence. I hate it. Izumi collapsed dramatically, across the table from Korba. The being chuckled, their dark red robe waving in a non-existent breeze. You are a nomad. I would think that such an ability is much more useful and interesting than the ability to. What was the ability of that one hero you told me of? The power to scream quite loudly? I can do that. They cannot travel to that which never existed. You can. Korba laughed again, the sound resonating in Izumi's mind like the chime of prayer bells. Besides, today is a day to talk of joys and accomplishments, not angers and prejudices. So, keeping that in our conscious thought, Izumi, what have your joys been? Izumi smiled. I see that we are matching clothes in a way. That gives me joy. Izumi gestured at her huge maroon jacket and black shorts, and at Korba's crimson garments. The happy chuckle of Korba was her reward, and the two began to talk. It had been too long since they had had the opportunity to have a heart to whatever Korba had. I better be leaving, Korba. Thank you for listening to me, Izumi said gratefully. They had been talking for several hours now, and Korba had simply been there for her. She was grateful the being was so. Likewise. I worry about many things, and speaking of them helps. Korba responded, their face turning wry. Nothing can kill a fear like dragging it into the light, yes? Izumi laughed. I suppose we are the ones who know that the most. Thank you again. Izumi responded. See you again soon, I hope. Goodbye, Korba. Goodbye, Zuzu. Human and other rose from their table and embraced. Any other nomad would have said it looked like a parent and daughter, or perhaps 2 siblings wishing each other farewell. As they let go, one of Korba's arms brushed back the emerald tendrils of hair over Izumi's face. The next time we meet, I expect these green eyes of yours to be happy. They instructed the greenette. A grin tugged at Izumi's face. I think I can manage that. She responded. The two finally parted and walked out of Intersect. Izumi watched as Korba suddenly disappeared, returning to their own home reality. Well, time to go back. Izumi muttered. She looked around at the rush of colors around her, snapshots of other realities, and wished she could save this view. Then she let herself puncture that barrier between everything and infinity and stepped. Izumi popped back out where she first stepped from, nearly tripping on the cracked concrete. Geez, I wish heroes would be more careful when they fought villains, especially if it's likely the area won't be repaired. Even really cool quirks cause a ton of property damage, and it's not good that such a big part of the city is still wrecked. What would the cost of fixing this place be? Would the heroes even care if they knew? Cementos has a good reputation, maybe he would? She mumbled, checking the time. The small girl sighed in relief, seeing only a few minutes had passed here, in contrast to the hours spent in Intersect. Okay, so I need to stop by the warehouse to check out the inventory, work on support gear for that new hero. As Izumi wandered off, she was unaware that she had broken her number 1 rule. She had let herself be seen by non-nomads. 3, to be exact. And they were amazed, to say the least. Where did she come from? Hato Nijire yelled, running to where she, along with her 2 companions, saw a green-haired girl pop into existence. The girl jumped up and down, looking for a hidden door or something similar. Come on, help me look, Mirio. She looked back to her companions, only seeing one. Tamaki. Where did Mirio-kun go? Tamaki shrugged. I think he's going after that kid. He yelled something about illegal quirk usage and bolted in the same direction she went. He replied, Well, why aren't you helping me? Nijire asked. He stared at her. If it was a quirk, would it have left a trace? Tamaki countered. The blue-haired girl pouted, still searching the alley for an explanation. She finally relented, her shoulders slumping. No, Nijire grumbled. Suddenly, they both looked to the street Izumi had disappeared to. A tall blonde boy emerged, looking rather disappointed. You didn't catch her, Mirio? Tamaki wondered incredulously. Mirio shook his head, his blonde hair flopping around his face. Nope. She was too fast for me to catch, and she disappeared into a train station. I know what she looks like though. He replied cheerfully. Tamaki sighed. Why don't we just go over to Principal Nedzu tomorrow and tell him? Tamaki asked. Tell him what? That we saw some green-haired kid pop out of nowhere and disappear. Hato shot back. Let's do it. Mirio cheered. The trio looked at each other. Almost simultaneously, Nijire and Tamaki sighed. They would have to go to Nedzu's office tomorrow and tell him about this mysterious green-haired girl and her subsequent disappearing act. Tamaki was not looking forward to it. A small green-haired child suddenly appeared out of thin air. A small white creature in a suit asked, standing on a large desk in an office not apparently designed for small creatures. Yes, Principal Nedzu, Mirio answered. Tamaki and Nijire had elected him their spokesperson before they had entered, and they hadn't uttered a word since the conversation began. She suddenly walked out of an alleyway in the ruined district of Mizudafu, the one that was destroyed in a villain fight several years ago. The kid didn't really seem to notice we were there, she just walked to a station and disappeared into the crowd. Nedzu drank some tea, looking contemplative. No sound, no kind of indication whatsoever? He queried, looking at the face of each one of his pupils in the room. No, sir. Each one replied. Nijire stepped forward a bit, looking uncertain. I went into the alley where she came out of, sir. The only way in or out was where she came from. Tagada-kun, Amikin, and I had been standing in the street that the alley led into for several minutes, and none of us spotted her. She had to have done something to get in and out of there, we would have seen her otherwise. Nijire looked into her principal's eyes. It's impossible that she didn't use a quirk. Izumi bent over a table with a stone top, soldering iron and solder in hand as she squinted at the machinery woven throughout the support gear she was making. The hero she was making it for, Nightstorm, had a quirk that let him produce large amounts of electricity as long as he was in dim or dark areas. The man had a light-absorbing costume which shielded him from light, but he also wanted to have communication devices put into his helmet, like Iron Man. Izumi stretched her sore back and shoulder, sighing. The soldering was finally done, and she had more than enough time to finish assembling Nightstorm's gear. Now, if only that buzzing in her bones would stop. Something had been going on in the realities since yesterday. This kind of annoyance only happened when something major was going to happen, something that would affect everything that is and could be. The first time Izumi had felt it, she had been 7, right before she stepped for the first time. Izumi sighed again, trying to tell the universe that she got the message, thank you very much. Sadly, the vibrations didn't stop. So she finished Nightstorm's gear and printed out the receipt and an owner's guide to the tech she had dealt with Nightstorm before and knew he had no idea how to use technology for him to use if he forgot how to use something in his gear. She packed it all into a case for him and sat in their testing/gear pickup room. Then she waited. And waited. And waited. Muttering under her breath, Izumi checked the clock. It's been 2 hours. Nightstorm said he'd be here at 12 p.m., and now it's 3. What's taking him so long? Almost as quickly as her irritation rose, it died. Oh no, what if he's hurt? He said today was a free day so he could pick up his equipment before his next patrol, but what if there was an emergency? Worried, she hopped down from her perch on a counter and skittered towards a computer that was along the pickup area of the room. When she was about to reach the desk the computer was on, the door opened. A moderately tall, extremely pale man poked his head in, waving his hand apologetically. Hello, Midoriya-san. I'm sorry I'm late. There was an emergency with a villain, and I had to stay for a while to get a report filed. Is the shop still open? It was Nightstorm. Izumi relaxed. Knowing he was alive helped calm her down, so she smiled at him and went to go pick up the case that had his support gear in it. Of course, I have your helmet and gauntlets here. I managed to incorporate the communicators and trackers you asked for. Keep in mind that these are insulated from your electricity, so you can completely utilize your quirk. But if you ever want more specifically created gear, you'll have to let our designers get more information about your quirk. She handed him the black box, making sure he had it before she let go and walked over to the computer she had been heading to before. She began printing the invoice, waiting for Nightstorm to ask for questions or help concerning his gear. Midoriya-san? How do I get this case to open? Nightstorm asked apologetically. Izumi looked up from her documentation and jogged over to the poor man. Oh, sorry. Press the buttons in, then flip the clasps. We make the cases like this so the case has no chance of breaking open, but I guess it can be pretty confusing too. Izumi demonstrated how to open the case, showing the electrical hero his new gear. Nightstorm picked up his helmet and gauntlets, happily inspecting them. The company's brand symbol, a green diamond, was on the back of each gauntlet and the inside of the visor, hidden from view unless you looked for them. Izumi was proud of these pieces. She had worked a long time on them, making sure that the electronics wouldn't be fried and Nightstorm wouldn't have his electricity insulated to the inside of the gear, rendering it ineffective and hurting the hero. She retrieved the invoice from the printer and brought it with a pen to where the pale man stood. If you would sign here and here? She pointed at the indicated spaces. While Nightstorm signed, Izumi tried to tamp down the growing feeling of wrong that was creeping up her body. Whatever was going to happen soon, and it'd ripple across the multiverse. She would be lying if she said that she wasn't curious, but at the same time, she just wanted whatever it was to stop. The buzzing and thrum of the other universe's song were rattling her bones, and it was giving her a headache. Aya-san? Midoriya-san? Is there something wrong? You seem distracted. Nightstorm was waving his hand in front of her face, sounding concerned. Izumi shook her head, smiling at the worried hero. I'm fine, thank you. I was just thinking about some things. Is the gear to your liking? Izumi replied. Nightstorm smiled excitedly. Yes, everything is perfect. I went ahead and signed the papers and authorized the last payment to Green Diamond's account. Please, give my regards to the designers and engineers. Izumi smiled, blasting the hero with pure sunshine and happiness. Will do, sir. Have a good day, and please be careful. Nightstorm smiled, packing up his gear into the case. He was leaving the room when he turned around, a curious expression on his face. By the way, Midoriya-san, when are you going to UA? Izumi blinked, a frozen smile fixed on her mouth. What? She stuttered. Her customer's smile started to fall, looking concerned. I assumed you'd be going to UA. You work here, so you have some grasp on engineering. Even if you don't get into the hero course, there's always the support course. Nightstorm said. Izumi sighed. I've already tested out of high school, and I'm going to college next year. She grinned at him. Thank you for your interest, though. Have a good day, sir. Nightstorm bowed, thanking her one last time and left. As soon as he was gone, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding in. Collapsing into a chair, she held her head. Throughout her conversation with her night storm, her headache had gotten worse. The anchor in her back, the one thing that let her control her stepping, was buzzing like a nest of angry hornets. It sent an unpleasant vibration into her chest, making her heart beat even faster. Overall, Izumi felt like time to go home. The girl muttered. She changed out of her uniform, which was a dark blue shirt with a green diamond and the words, "Green Diamond Designs," embroidered onto the chest, and into a more comfortable jacket and jeans. Izumi secured her long hair into a braid, and closed up the shop, making sure everything was locked and accounted for. Then she grabbed her backpack and left, taking her time getting back home. I wish the mayor would get this place cleared up, Izumi thought as she wandered around Mizudafu. She wasn't paying attention as she wandered under a tunnel, spaced out until the calamity from all that could be and was shattered in her eardrums. Oh, that hurts. What just happened? She still wasn't paying attention when a mass bubbled up behind her from a sewer grate, forming an ominous stain against the bright sky. Tisha, little girl. Usually I'd go for an adult, but you'll do. Izumi looked behind her shoulder as she crouched on the dirty road. It's you. The sludge villain looked startled as Izumi stood up, still a bit dizzy from having her ears blasted. Kindly screw off. I'm tired and have a headache. The villain blinked. What? Izumi started to walk away, clearly dismissing him. Don't ignore me. He roared, a slimy tendril reaching towards her retreating back. The moment it touched Izumi's back, she pivoted around and grabbed the mass. You've killed different versions of me so many times, you know. Her tone was coldly conversational, only slightly betraying her anger. You've hurt so many people, destroyed so many things. She let go of him, turning back around. Give yourself up. Maybe this doesn't have to end in violence. The villain started shaking in anger. Don't ignore me. You'll be my invisibility cloak, no one will catch me. He roared, engulfing her tiny frame in an instant, trying to take over her body. Izumi choked, desperately trying to inhale air instead of the villain. She had anticipated this, but still, being choked by a villain was not fun, and adding her headache into the mix just made everything terrible. You know what? Screw you. I've had to deal with enough today, and you'll go attack someone else if I let you go. Izumi thought, finally losing the last of her patience. She opened a teeny-tiny little gate, one that had both entrance and exit in this reality, and pulled the villain in with her. The barrier wasn't as hard to get through if she stayed in her universe, but it was still slightly unpleasant. On the bright side, the sludge villain had recoiled a bit, so Izumi wasn't being suffocated anymore. They reached the exit in a blink of an eye, and the sludge villain was too shocked to react to Izumi booting him out of the gate and into a jail cell. One that was a locked room with solid walls and had no way for him to escape. Out! Izumi ordered, wiping the last bits of gunk from her clothes and flicking them into the cell. Wait a second, what dash? Before the villain could finish his sentence, Izumi had closed the exit to the gate and was back where the sludgy monster first attacked her. That was disgusting, she grumbled. I hope he can't identify me. That'd be bad. The young girl had barely enough time to readjust her crumpled clothing before the sewer grate flew out of place yet again. Have no fear, for I am here. A blonde streak rocketed out of the hole, stopping when it noticed that there was no villain there and the only person who was only seemed mildly startled by the sudden appearance. All Might! Izumi yelped. What are you doing here? Your agency is in Tokyo, and Mizudafu is not Tokyo. The number one hero froze. Have you seen a sludge-like villain around here? All Might boomed, looking for the said villain. Izumi shook her head, feigning ignorance. No. Sorry. Izumi said. As the hero turned to leave, she called after him. Hey, can I have your autograph? Izumi yelled, her voice echoing off of the walls. All Might spun around with his trademark smile in place. Of course. Izumi turned to rummage through her backpack, finally finding a sketchbook for her support gear designs that she always carries around and move it at All Might with a pen. She bounced in place, looking like a happy green baby rabbit. When All Might handed her notebook back to her with a flourish and a grin, Izumi beamed at him. She may not want to be a hero, but All Might was super cool. Unless you were in one of those dimensions where he's a villain. But those realities weren't this one. So she grabbed the notebook and held it to her chest, smiling at him. Thanks, All Might. She bounced off, bowing to the hero before she left. Right before All Might was about to follow her example and bound off, his cell phone buzzed. He pulled it out, instinctively lowering his voice while answering the call. Naomasa, what's wrong? Has the sludge villain resurfaced? What? He's in a cell? And you have no idea how he got there? All Might incredulously said, listening to his friend explain this rather peculiar situation. Hold on. I'll be right there. The hero launched himself in the direction of the police station. How did a villain who just committed armed robbery get into the most secure cell in a police station without anyone noticing? He wondered. Weird. Dismissing the bright little girl he had just given his autograph to, he went to see this villain who he had spent almost all of his transformation time hunting. I'm Detective Naomasa. Would you tell me why you, a wanted criminal, is sitting in our cell? A man said, staring incredulously at a sludgy mass that didn't really resemble a person. Since he had been discovered, the villain had been securely restrained and was sitting at a table with a chair on the other side for the detective. The wall to Naomasa's left had a two-way glass mirror in it, so others could look in on interrogations. This little girl just shoved me in here. The thing screeched, trying to struggle out of the court-canceling manacles. So you're saying a kid grabbed you, teleported, and threw you into a prison cell? Naomasa asked the villain skeptically. Yes. The slimy criminal burbled, waving his arms. Or at least he was trying to. The restraints he was in hindered any movement below his head, but judging by his face he was trying to gesture but couldn't. The girl just grabbed me and threw me into the cell. The detective looked at him with the most done expression the villain had ever seen. You're lying. What did you do before you were put in here? He said, sounding tired. Nothing. The villain protested, right as someone knocked on the cell door. Naomasa got out of his chair and walked over to the door, opening it slightly. A whispered conversation passed between the detective and whoever was on the other side of the door. He kept looking back at the constrained villain, seeming curious. Finally, he walked back to the table in the center of the room where the villain was. Can you give me a description of the kid? Naomasa asked after looking at the criminal for a few minutes. Yeah. Small kid, freckles all over her face, green hair and eyes. She was wearing jeans and a jacket. Said some super creepy stuff too. Muttered the sludgy mass. The detective raised an eyebrow. You're not lying in your description. What did she say? The villain shivered, his body jiggling, still scared by the girl. She just talked like she knew me, like she knew what I did. The villain muttered. Naomasa looked at him in surprise. The villain wasn't lying. The detective turned to the mirror and nodded slightly, letting the onlookers know the villain was telling the truth. Someone tapped on the door again, signaling Naomasa to return to the door. What? He bit out, irritated. A deflated All Might raised his hands defensively. Sorry, I just got here. What happened? The hero whispered quietly. Naomasa sighed, stepping into the hallway and closing the door behind him. The villain is saying a kid grabbed him and teleported him into the cell. The cameras around it don't show anything, and the cameras inside the cell itself haven't been working since we brought in a villain with a quirk that caused machinery to disassemble itself. He's not lying when he's talking about the girl putting him here, so we need to figure out who she is. He explained. All Might nodded, understanding the situation. Do you have a description? All Might rumbled. Yes. Small girl, maybe early to middle teens, with green hair, green eyes, and freckles. She was wearing a jacket, jeans, and had a backpack. Why are you making that face? It looks like you're skiing on a lemon. Naomasa told All Might. I met someone who sounds like that while I was looking for the villain. The gaunt man croaked, trying not to cough up blood in surprise. Naomasa stared at him. What? He said flatly. The detective was not amused. And you didn't notice her doing anything odd? All Might shook his head. She was walking under a bridge, On her way home presumably. All Might explained. I'll stay and help with filling out some details. Let me just call Nedzu so he'll know why I'm going to be late. All Might walked down the hallway a bit for some privacy before steeling his nerves and making the call. Hello, Nedzu. I wanted you to know I'll be a bit late today for our meeting. I have to help fill out a description of a young girl who transported a villain or something into a holding cell at the police station. What? You're coming to the police station? Now. The call ended abruptly, leaving All Might shaking. Naomasa looked at his friend. What did he say? He asked, pretending like he wasn't listening in to the entire conversation. All Might looked at Naomasa, fear in his brilliant blue eyes. Nedzu said he's coming to the police station. I must admit, I am quite curious about this girl. Nedzu chattered. I believe some of my students saw her yesterday, and I was unable to identify her using the national databases. All Might and Naomasa both flinched. They had had enough experience with Nedzu to know that he would see that as a challenge. The tiny creature looked up at them, a competitive sparkle in his eye. Other than a physical and quirk description, what do you know? And why isn't she showing up in the quirk registry? The principal waited for an answer. Upon hearing none, he smiled more than he was already and turned to look at the villain through the glass mirror, still in his restraints. So, what do you suggest that we do? Naomasa eventually ventured. I believe that I will try to find her, Nedzu said cheerfully. And then? All Might asked. We'll talk, Nedzu said, a cherubic smile on his scarred face. After? He looked at his companions. Let's see what happens, shall we? Izumi trudged into her apartment, exhausted. Her headache was still raging, chewing at whatever was left of her brain. The full-body pain from the multiverse's chaos was still screaming throughout her nerves, and she just wanted to go to sleep. She threw her backpack down with her shoes at the door, walking past the empty kitchen and living room on the way to her room. When she spotted her bed, she raised her arms and flopped onto it like a beached walrus. Oh yes, this is the life, Izumi muttered, snuggling into her nest of blankets and pillows. Comfort me in my misery, sweet of slumber. She relaxed into the warmth and safety of her bed and quickly lost consciousness. Dreaming was always a gamble with Izumi. Sometimes she would have ordinary dreams, like memories of her childhood and weird amalgamations of things she had seen or done while she was awake. Her favorite was a memory of Korba cradling her and singing a lullaby when Izumi was 7. The being's secondary arms were braiding her hair, while the first set was holding her and the third were weaving the winds into complex patterns. The wind had carried the harmony within itself, so it sounded like a choir was singing to Izumi instead of only Korba. But her other dreams? She remembered all of the impossible things she had seen. Long-dead things walking the cosmos, stars dying and being reborn in minutes, if not seconds. Universes collapsing as their songs come to a dissonant end. Images of a single person overlapping an infinite amount of times, one version per universe until the barrier cracked and the person had disappeared. These were the dreams that murdered her sanity and resurrected it just as quickly. Thankfully, she didn't dream this time. Her sleep was the quiet death-like slumber that only afflicted the truly exhausted, which Izumi was. She had been tense after her meeting with Korba because of the immediate sense of dissonance. Add to the fact that she had had to spend such a long time working on Nightstorm's gear, and you got a tired green bean child. When Izumi woke up, it was evening. The sky had long since turned orange, and the quiet buzzing of insects filled the air. "Ak," Izumi groaned. "I want food but I'm too tired to cook." She rolled out of her bed, still wrapped in at least one blanket, and staggered to her kitchen. She finally selected leftovers and quickly ate them, not even tasting them. The note from her mother, Midoriya Inko, was still on the table with an explanation that she was away on business. Izumi picked it up, blearily rereading it again before gently placing it back on the table. "I wonder when she'll be back." The greenette muttered, cleaning up her dishes and turning on the television to watch the news. And that is how Midoriya Izumi ended her day, watching hero fights on the news while jotting down notes on heroes, fighting styles, and the support equipment that would best suit them. So, what do we have in ways of information in regards to this mystery teleporter? Nedzu asked, addressing the pro-heroes and police officers in a meeting room in UA. Naomasa stood up and addressed the whole room. We know their quirk and their appearance. That's it. The detective waited a few seconds for any kind of question and then dropped into his seat. Everyone blinked for a few seconds and then began yelling. How do we not know their identity? A hero called from the corner of the room. No two quirks are exactly alike except between family members. So we just have to find a quirk that matches the description. Another person countered from the first hero's side. Some quirks completely mutate from what their parents had. We should try to track them down on their physical description. The two heroes started bickering as everyone watched, bemused. After a few minutes of argument, someone in a corner cleared their throat. Everyone turned and looked as a person emerged from a bright yellow sleeping bag like a particularly passive-aggressive butterfly. It obviously isn't that simple. The databases have most likely all been searched for someone matching this person's physical and quirk combination together. And that someone hasn't been found, apparently. The tall man with scraggly black hair turned to face Nedzu and Naomasa at the front of the room, his eyes piercing. Am I correct? Yes, you are. Nedzu cheered from atop his chair, merrily clapping his paws. The heroes and police officers stared at him. Someone dropped an object, and the sharp sound shocked everyone from their stupor. What? Someone said flatly from the side of the room. The person's tone seemed to sum up the room's general mood at the moment, bewildered and wanting to get to the point. The tiny mammal jumped onto the table, amiably waving his tiny paws. No person matching both physical and quirk description have shown up in the databases. Honestly, this has been repeated several times. Good heavens, do you all need us to spell it out for all of you? This person is a ghost. Nedzu smiled, his eyes sparkling. Thankfully, I am rather experienced in hunting down these kinds of people. His grin turned predatory. I must admit, I am rather curious about how they have evaded us thus far. All Might stood up in his muscular form, looking worried. Everyone, when I met this person, they looked like a young girl. We don't know if that is what they truly look like, so until we know for sure we advise caution. The other professionals looked concerned as well, one of them quietly raising her hand. Are they seriously this much of a threat? She asked hesitantly. Maybe. As we said, we don't know anything about them. Naomasa shrugged. Nedzu sighed, clapping his paws to gain everyone's attention. This person has a powerful quirk, and we know virtually nothing about them. At the moment, this is more of an identification search than a villain manhunt. He stared, his beady black eyes focused. Don't engage violently unless they provoke first. Izumi didn't know why she was awake at 3 a.m. She didn't want to be awake at 3 in the morning, but her freaking headache wouldn't let her sleep for very long, even though it had been 3 weeks since they started after she met with Korba. So here she was, wandering around the streets of Mizudafu at the wee hours of the morning like an idiot. I need to sleep. Universes, why do you hate me? Izumi warbled, pacing the main streets. She saw a flash of movement from the corner of her emerald eyes and spun quickly towards it, backing up a few steps. All sense of security fled as she scanned the buildings and rooftops, looking for whatever had caught her attention. Seeing nothing, she kept turning and searching for it. The green-haired girl remembered monsters from other realities, ones that'd keep out of your perception until they struck. Izumi didn't want to be one of those poor people. They probably did not exist in her reality, but she didn't want to take a chance. Besides, the sense of discord and impending doom from her very being was getting worse. The girl was on edge and did not want to be attacked. Come out, wherever you are, Izumi sang quietly under her breath. She heard something shift behind her, and she turned to face it. She didn't know what she was expecting, but it was not what she saw. A hero? She tilted her head to the side, looking like a confused puppy. Why are you stalking me? It's 3 in the morning, and that's kind of suspicious. Yellow goggles, white scarves. Izumi's analytical mind sprang into action. Your eraser head, right? Oh, I take back what I said earlier. It makes sense for you to be out so late at night. You're an underground hero. Sorry for being presumptuous. I was kind of freaked out by knowing someone's following me. She waved her hands apologetically, trying to correct herself from earlier. "What's your name?" she heard suddenly. Izumi stopped waving her hands, peering at the hero. Why?" the girl asked. "Someone with your physical description is suspected of," Eraserhead trailed off. He didn't exactly know if the mystery person's actions were vigilantism or self-defense. And saying one could tip off the girl if it is her. He decided to hedge his bets on the safer option. Using a teleportation quirk in self-defense harmlessly. "We just need to find out what happened." Izumi gave him a flat stare. "I can't teleport stuff." "Sorry. You have the wrong person." She turned to walk away, quietly freaking out. "It's Eraserhead. I wish I met him in better circumstances. I have so many questions for him." The screaming in her psyche and body was reaching a crescendo, and she tried to return home quickly, before whatever is going to happen happens. Suddenly, Izumi heard shifting cloth behind her, and she froze. "Oh no, please let this not be what I think it is." White scarves that looked like bandages wound themselves around her torso and arms, effectively stopping her movement. "No, no, 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 no." Footsteps clopped up behind her, and she heard a quiet voice. "Look, I'll let you go if you just tell me what your name is." "No, no, 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 no." The onslaught on her senses suddenly rose to a sinks. Everything was too loud, songs only she could hear were being forced into her ears. Her body tried to step but her anchor prevented it, making it feel like Izumi had a knife in her back instead of a gem. The pain of being pulled apart and being held together simultaneously was agony, and she couldn't take any more. She tensed, her structure shuddering. Whatever she had been dreading was happening right now, and Izumi couldn't escape or stop it. So, doing something she would be embarrassed about for the rest of her life, she opened her mouth and screamed. The sound was inhuman and sent shivers up Eraserhead's spine. The only thing keeping his grip on his capture weapon was instinct. And just as suddenly as the sound erupted, it stopped. A tiny girl with green hair and eyes, freckles, and a large jacket who was running around at 3 in the morning in Mizutofu collapsed into Eraserhead's scarves, utterly unconscious. So the hero did what he felt the only sane reaction was at the time. He checked her vitals and called Nedzu. Whatever was causing the realities to freak out has stopped. Izumi noted to herself. She didn't know where she was at the moment. She had been moved since she passed out, and the headaches and other pains from the universe's hissy fit were gone. However, a more normal headache had taken its place, keeping her in discomfort. The girl knew she was on some sort of bed, there was some sort of 4 in her arm. Quiet whispering filled the air. Izumi perked her ears, still trying to seem asleep so she could try to find a way to escape. "What were you thinking, grabbing the poor child like that?" No wonder she fainted, she was scared. She heard an older woman's voice whisper angrily. Someone else murmured something, making the woman even more furious. "That's no excuse. You're lucky she didn't lash out. What if she had an offensive quirk?" More murmuring, and then a sharp thwacking noise reverberated in the room. "You can't erase everything, Eraserhead. For someone who prides themselves on logic, you are an absolute fool sometimes." Izumi tried to suffocate the laugh that bubbled out of her throat, but it burst out into the quiet room. "Ha ha." The laughter was hysterical but still filled with genuine mirth. She opened her eyes, looking at the spectacle in front of her. A tiny old lady in a doctor's coat holding an oversized syringe was looking at her, more than a hint of concern in her gaze. Eraserhead was standing next to her, looking irritated and perhaps a bit guilty. He was rubbing his arm, and the woman was holding the syringe like a baseball bat. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. They were both hovering at the foot of the bed Izumi was laying on. Izumi suddenly felt nauseous, her laughter cutting out as she tried not to vomit. "Here, dearie." A wrinkled hand patted Izumi's curly head as its twin pushed a trash bin beside the bed. "Now, how do you feel?" "Headache. I feel like I'm going to puke. I want to sleep. So, overall, I feel like CRP." Izumi gurgled unhappily. Recovery Girl shot a glare at Eraserhead. "Let me help." Izumi looked up just in time to get a large kiss on the forehead from this weird old woman. The greenette rebooted for a few seconds, then stared at the woman. She still felt tired but not unnaturally so. I don't hurt anymore. Recovery girl? The old woman nodded. Not to sound rude, but why are you here and where am I? Recovery girl stared at Eraserhead, apparently trying to make him respond to Izumi's question. Finally, he stepped forward, staring at the girl. What do you remember? Izumi stared right back at him. I remember you questioning me and grabbing me with your scarves. Do you usually do that to everyone who doesn't tell you their name? She said coolly, obviously unimpressed. I also remember pain and someone screaming. Was it me? Eraserhead nodded. You just answered your first question. So, how about the second? Izumi stared at him, her green eyes unwavering. Recovery girl, and a room that looks more like a nurse's office than a hospital room? Izumi sighed and rubbed her sore head, peeking between her fingers at the man. Please say that I'm not in UA. Eraserhead didn't move, but a terrifying smile spread across his face. Lies are illogical, so I won't lie. You're in UA. Izumi groaned, flinging herself back down onto the cot. Why am I here then? Her annoyed tone clear. As I said earlier, someone with your description is suspected of using a teleportation quirk in self-defense. We need to know if it was you. He explained bluntly. Izumi raised her head and squinted at him. Look at my records. It can't be me. Eraserhead stared at her. In order to do that, we need to know who you are. Eraserhead explained. Izumi stared right back at the man's dead eyes. Are you being serious right now? I think you are, but how can you not know who I am by now? Did you not look for me in police records or anything like that? I mean, you probably did, and apparently you came up with nothing, so now you're at a dead end and probably frustrated. The young girl dissolved into mumbling, not noticing the bewildered stares of the other two adults in the room. Recovery girl poked Eraserhead in the knee with her syringe. When he shot an annoyed glance down at her, she gestured for him to come closer to her so they could talk. Would you go get Nedzu and All Might? All Might should try to identify her, and Nedzu, Recovery girl trailed off, but Eraserhead understood what she meant. Nedzu had taken a special interest in this kid, so he would want to talk to her as soon as possible. Eraserhead felt bad for her, almost. He quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Izumi to mutter and Recovery girl to wonder what she was talking about. A few minutes later, the door reopened. Eraserhead walked in, followed by All Might and Nedzu. Izumi was sitting up in the cot, rubbing her chin pensively and muttering. All Might whispered to Nedzu, who was standing on Eraserhead's shoulder. They had a tiny conversation for a few minutes, Eraserhead occasionally butting in while keeping his eyes on the small girl who still had not noticed them. Eventually, All Might stepped away and confidently walked up to Izumi, who stayed oblivious. Recovery girl whapped him behind the knee with her cane once it became obvious that he was going to use his regular, loud, heroic voice. He silently took the note to hush and looked at Izumi. Hello, young lady. I met you a while ago. Are you all right? All Might asked, his signature jovial grin spread across his face. Without even looking at him, Izumi responded with a fine, and kept muttering to herself and staring at the wall. All Might stared at her, confused. She didn't seem like the kid he met so many weeks ago, the happy, bouncing kid who grinned when she got his autograph. This one seemed distant. He tried again. How do you like my autograph? This time Izumi looked at him, faintly smiling. Thank you very much for it. I love it, she said quietly. Her eyes suddenly came into focus, drilling into his face. Wait a second, when did you get here? She yelled, pointing at him. All Might blinked. About 5 minutes or so. You didn't notice us? He asked gently. Izumi shook her head furiously, small curls escaping from her braid. No. She pointed at Eraserhead and Nedzu. How long have they been there? Also around 5 minutes. All Might answered. He looked down at Recovery girl. Did she get injured or something? Recovery girl glared at him. Like I would let you talk to someone who's obviously injured. The elderly heroine huffed. Nedzu took that as his cue to hop into the conversation. More precisely, onto the chair next to Izumi's cot. Hello. I am Nedzu, principal of UA. Would you mind telling us your name? The tiny creature said cheerfully, waving his paws in a friendly fashion. It's only polite, I just introduced myself. Izumi stared at him, bewildered. Emerald green eyes met beady black ones, and understood each other. My name is Midoriya Izumi. It's a pleasure to meet you, Izumi said, smiling at Nezu. Eraserhead quietly slipped out of the room. What's your quirk? Mine is called High Specs. It grants me an amazing intellect. Nezu probed. Izumi looked down, making a face at the covers of the cot. Well, you know my name already, so you'd find this out pretty quick. She looked up at him sheepishly. I'm quirkless. Always have been. I tried to tell Eraserhead earlier, but I think he took it as an evasion instead of the truth. She shrugged. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Nezu stared at her, his beady eyes bright. Oh, it's no inconvenience. I have a question for you, actually. Izumi perked up, looking at him in the eyes again. What is it? She asked curiously. Why were you walking around at 3 in the morning? He asked. Oh. Izumi looked back down at her hands. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. And you just happened upon Eraserhead? Izumi nodded, her green curls bouncing around her face. I thought I heard someone and it was him. She quickly replied. Nezu smiled and hopped down from the chair. Well then, I see no reason to keep you here. I apologize for the distress we must have caused you. Have a good day, he said. Izumi bolted up from the bed, swaying a bit on her feet. Oh, thank you for your consideration. I should probably get home, I have a lot to do today. Izumi called as she ran out of the room. All Might, would you? Nezu said, looking at where the girl was. I doubt she could leave UA without knowing where to go. Certainly. All Might boomed, following Izumi. Nezu smiled quietly to himself, quietly laughing. What is it? Recovery Girl asked cautiously. She's interesting, Nezu replied. Today is a school day, and she didn't mention it once. Normally, that is a rather important thing for young people. He hummed quietly to himself, smiling sadistically. Eraserhead, what did you find about this mysterious Midoriya Izumi? Eraserhead walked in, a small tablet in hand. Everything she said is true, he said gruffly. Her mother works in a hospital in central Japan. Her father seems to have disappeared a few years ago. The kid graduated high school a while ago and works somewhere, some kind of support gear company. She's registered as quirkless, and a foot X-ray confirmed it when she was 4. He looked at Nezu. It's all normal. Nezu hummed excitedly. That's what makes it all so interesting, though. How did she pop out of thin air if she doesn't have a quirk? Did someone help her? The grin spread across Nezu's face. We need to find this out, I am afraid. As Izumi flew through UA's corridors, she heard distant chatter from classes. She had been in UA before, in different realities. She had explored every inch of the building, had talked to every person at least once. She had been in their futures, so she knew who the 1A class would be. Izumi had been friends with most of them. Mineta is the only one she wasn't friends with, and she had mostly good memories of those other places. Sometimes, though, it would all go wrong and she couldn't stop anything and she doesn't want to remember it but dash. Different place, different reality. Izumi ran out from UA's gates, never noticing a bewildered All Might keeping pace behind her until she left the campus. She certainly didn't notice All Might pulling out a phone and calling someone. Nezu? Midoriya Izumi just ran out of UA like she knew the building. How could she do that? All Might whispered into the phone, trying to stay unnoticed by everyone around him. Ha-ha-hee-hee dash. Nezu hung up his phone, still chuckling to himself. Eraserhead and Recovery Girl stared at him, slightly disturbed by the small, giggling animal. What happened? Recovery Girl asked suspiciously. Midoriya Izumi just navigated UA like she's been here before. Which is quite impossible. So, how did she do it? Nezu waited for a response. Upon hearing none, he continued. Let's find out. Flag everything and everyone she has ties to, and wait for something odd to happen. Eraserhead raised an eyebrow. Odd? He asked drily. Nezu turned to him, smiling. More teleportations, perhaps. Maybe other knowledge she should have no reason to possess? She is an interesting human, and those don't tend to come around very often. Shall we see who will win this little game of evasion? Izumi was staring at a form, anxiously drumming her pencil while willing the proper words to appear. It was a simple request, really. A hero was asking for an interview so he could get some specialized gear. If it was any other hero Endeavor isn't a hero, he doesn't count, she would have accepted in a heartbeat. Even All Might, Eraserhead, or Nedzu she would have preferred over the person who was asking to see her. But no, it just had to be Sir Night-Eye, the hero who could see the future. Hooray, Izumi muttered glumly. Would he see my ability, or could he even understand it? Ugh, what does he want? She peeked back at the paper. Glasses to hide his eyes when he uses his quirk, which is unspecified. That's it. Green Diamond Designs was known for creating full costumes, support gears, repair, and specialty items. Glasses like what Sir Night-Eye may want could be classified as specialty items, but there were many other companies who were more well-known. Sure, GDD had an excellent reputation, but it was still new. So why is he asking for an interview and support gear without even coming here first? She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. I don't want to do this. I really don't want him anywhere near me. If he can see my future and he activates his quirk for some reason, I have no idea what would happen. Izumi began twirling her pencil between her fingers, building up a steady rhythm. But do I have an alternative? She paused for a few seconds. I could get Koyaku to interview Sir Night-Eye, but she's super shy. And I'm the only engineer. She raked her hand through her braid, pulling loose tendrils of curly green hair. DMN it. Her pencil scribbled across the paper. Sir Night-Eye, we will be happy to see you on the date you requested. Please feel free to raise any concerns or questions you may have during this session. Likewise, we ask for cooperation on your end. Additionally, feel free to bring a guest. She read out. The girl sighed, rubbing her face. I'm gonna die, aren't I? Izumi groused. She laid her head on the table, waiting for something to happen. Preferably the universe to pop out an answer onto her head, or the table. The table would be better, probably. After a few minutes, it became clear the universe wasn't feeling helpful. Izumi dragged herself to the mailbox and mailed the form to Sir Night-Eye's agency, feeling dread crawl up her stomach. I have definitely had better ideas, she declared, walking back to her apartment. Sir Night-Eye arrived 3 days later at Green Diamond Designs, a guest in tow. Izumi was waiting in the lobby for them. This was not a good idea, was running through her head like a mantra. When Sir Night-Eye entered, he looked around after seeing Izumi, like he was expecting someone else. Izumi stuck a polite smile on her face and walked up to him. Hello, Sir Night-Eye. My name is Midoriya Izumi. I'll be your interviewer today, please follow me. As she was turning to lead the little group to a conference room, Sir Night-Eye's guest sprang out from behind him. Hello again. A tall blonde teenager in UA's uniform beamed at Izumi. Izumi stared back at him, surprised. Have we met before? Izumi asked, edging away from him. The boy looked at her curiously, then broke into a grin. Oh, you didn't notice me, he said. Sorry, I should introduce myself. Togata Mirio, hero in training. Izumi smiled, pretending that she wasn't panicking. Oh no. I remember him. Sunshine Incarnate is in my workshop. But he recognizes me from somewhere? I've met alternate versions of him and Sir Night-Eye before, so I can maybe predict what they'll do. I know their quirks and personalities after all. Izumi raised her hand tentatively like she was asking a question. Togata-san? It's nice to meet you and I would love to chat, but Sir Night-Eye and I do need to talk. Do you wish to talk after the appointment is finished? She asked. I hate speaking so formally, but I can't really talk any other way right now, she mused. Oh sure. Mirio beamed. Sir Night-Eye coughed behind him. If you both wouldn't mind, the tall hero stated while adjusting his glasses. I feel this appointment is rather important. Mirio jumped up like he was electrocuted. Sorry, sir. He yelped. giving both Izumi and Sir apologetic looks. Of course, I apologize for my distraction. This way if you would. Izumi waved behind her, then began leading the way to a conference room. I think this will be one of our quicker appointments because we already know your expectations out of our company, Sir Night-Eye. The conference room their appointment was in was one of the smaller rooms, with neutral colors and small artworks dotting the walls. Sir Night-Eye and Mirio walked over to two dark blue chairs and sank into them, while Izumi sat across the table from them in her own cushy chair. I brought Mirio because he needs to gain experience with dealing with support companies? I trust that is tolerable? Sir Night-Eye asked stiffly. Yes. Now, you want glasses that can essentially conceal your eyes when you use your quirk? Izumi asked, settling into business mode. Yes. Sir Night-Eye said bluntly. Judging by your glasses now, you actually need them to see. I assume that contacts or eye repair surgery are out of the question because you don't want to potentially injure your quirk. I am assuming it's eye-based, after all. Izumi shot a calculating look at the hero as she dug out some files and a notebook from a small filing cabinet next to her seat. Sir Night-Eye nodded. You're correct. I hope you understand me not wishing to explain the specifics of my quirk to you. However, I simply need a piece of gear to make sure people cannot know when I use my quirk. Izumi smiled. I guess that shutter glasses are out of the question then, she quipped as she flipped open the notebook to a new page. Now, any specific requests other than that? She trailed off as she stared at the pro hero sitting across from her. He had an odd expression on his face like he was holding in a cough. Are you all right? Izumi asked. I'm fine. And please, no shutter glasses. Sir Night-Eye finally said, coughing a bit. All right. So, how do you want them to work, first of all? Izumi questioned, drumming her pen on the table. Do you want them to make it seem like your eyes appear to be normal when you use your quirk? Just like that, Izumi and Sir Night-Eye began discussing what was needed in his support item while Mirio stared at them both, dumbfounded by the rapid exchange of information. I think we have a solid concept for your glasses, Sir Night-Eye. The piece should be ready in a week or so. We will send you a notice once it is finished so you will be able to test them. Izumi said cheerfully, closing the notebook and gathering the other papers. Sir Night-Eye nodded, turning to look at Mirio who had a shell-shocked expression on his face. Mirio, if you want to talk, now is the time. He shook the blonde's shoulder, knocking him out of his trance. Oh yeah, I saw you pop out of an alley a while ago. Do you have a teleportation quirk? Mirio asked excitedly. He went right for the jugular. Izumi screamed internally. Wait, he saw me? CRP. I don't have a teleportation quirk or anything like that, sorry. You must be mistaken. She muttered apologetically. He looked at her, tilting his head. Okay then. So, do you have any ideas for a hero costume that could phase around? He chirped, apparently forgetting what he was previously asking Izumi about. Phasing? She stared at his face, then it hit her. You're that guy who Mirio's agonized face stopped her before she could finish her sentence. How am I going to be the #1 hero if that's the only way people remember me? Mirio said, burying his face into his hands. Burn out those memories with your accomplishments, I guess. Izumi said matter-of-factly as she tapped her pen against her notebook. So you want a costume that can phase with you? Sounds fun. Her lips pulled back into an animalistic grin. Ask if Principal Nedzu would be willing to subsidize the cost of the costume through UA. If not, Green Diamond Designs has some funding set aside for situations like these. Mirio perked up. You'd help? Izumi nodded. GDD is a support company. We help heroes, and you're a hero in training. It's always better to get these kinds of issues ironed out before you make your debut as a hero, so it won't hurt you later on. So, have you noticed any ability to phase anything else with you? He shook his head, blonde cowlick shaking from the rapid movement. No. Izumi stared at him, evaluation clear in her gaze. I have an idea. Let's talk, Togata Mirio. 2 hours later, a haggard Mirio laid back in his chair as Sir Night-Eye and Izumi ironed out the last of the details concerning the glasses. Izumi had questioned the poor student relentlessly, asking about every bit of his quirk and asked him to demonstrate it on things such as the table and walls. Hold on a moment, Midoriya-san. You have something on your shoulder. Sir Night Eye suddenly said, sweeping something off of her shoulder. Oh, thank you. Did you get whatever it was? Izumi said, very carefully not looking at his face. I really hope he's just being nice and not trying to use his quirk. I think so. Mirio, we're done here. Stop pretending you're dead, please. Sir Night Eye called to his guest, turning towards him. Mirio stood up, stretching his back. Thank you for accommodating him. He has always been curious about support companies. The hero murmured to Izumi. Izumi smiled absently. It's quite all right. I'll escort you out. As the trio walked towards the door of the building, Sir Night Eye spoke up. Midoriya-san, why do you work here? Izumi looked back at him, forgetting not to make eye contact. Oh dang, I hope he won't activate his quirk. I can't let him know that I know about it, though. I like working here. It gives me something to do, and I like helping people, she answered nervously. Mirio looked at Izumi curiously. Are you gonna apply to UA then? He asked. Izumi wilted a bit. Why do people always ask that? She silently lamented before answering Mirio. I don't really want to. I'm happy here. I don't have to deal with a lot of loud people who I don't like. Let's go, Mirio. We've taken up quite a bit of Midoriya-san's time. Sir Night Eye suddenly interjected that he looked at the hero, then back at Izumi. Well, I hope you change your mind. Bye. Mirio said cheerfully before following Sir out of the building. Izumi let out a deep breath before rubbing her eyes with her hands. I hope nothing happens with Sir Night Eye and his quirk. She thought again, before dragging her hands off of her face. Well, what is done. Sir? That kid was acting kind of weird, right? The blonde asked as he and Sir Night Eye were walking back to their agency. Sir Night Eye looked at him. What makes you say that? He asked neutrally. Mirio fidgeted. Well, she seemed nervous when I asked her about UA. Do you think something's wrong? Sir Night Eye sighed. Not necessarily. People act oddly at times, but I will agree that she seemed to be cautious of something. Her humor is definitely odd. He shuddered, remembering Izumi's shutter glasses joke. What do you think we should do? Mirio asked quietly, looking at his feet. The hero looked at his in turn. I could use foresight. There's no guarantee that it would provide useful information, but it would perhaps give us a hint. Mirio looked at his mentor, visibly happier. But if it turns out that I need foresight in the next 24 hours and I can't use it because of this, there will be trouble. Mirio's face turned serious and he nodded. I understand, sir. Good. He muttered as he activated his quirk. Images flew past him, many of them making no sense. They weren't connected in any way, and some of the things in them seemed impossible. But there was one image that made sense. Mirio. The young hero in training looked at Sir Night Eye. Yes, sir? We need to talk to someone in UA. Now. The duo veered off course, heading to UA's campus instead of the agency they were previously heading to. Sir? Is it bad? Do we need to go help her? Mirio asked, determination strong in his voice. Sir Night Eye shook his head. I think she will be safe for the time being. But we need to tell someone in UA about this child. Nedzu stirred his tea, contemplating what Sir Night Eye just told him. So you looked into Midoriya Izumi's future and saw her wearing a UA uniform? He asked curiously. Correct. Sir Night Eye said. And you activated your quirk because you thought something was wrong with her situation? Nedzu prodded. Yes. The man said. The principal tutate. You don't need to count your words, Sir Knight. I have been looking into that child recently as well. She is rather interesting. Now, what else did you see when you looked into her future? Sir Night Eye leaned forward and began to describe exactly what he had seen when he had peeked into the girl's future. Now I most certainly need to know more about this child. Nedzu cackled into his tea as Sir Night Eye leaned back in his chair, done telling Nedzu about his visions. This was a bad idea. The man mumbled under his breath. Nedzu's head snapped around, his beady black eyes meeting Sir's. Did you say something? The principal asked. No, I didn't say anything. Sir Night Eye said quickly. Nedzu looked at his tea for a moment, then back the man sitting in front of him. Ask Midoriya-san about coming to UA at some point to talk to our support course, if you would. I think it would interest her. Alright. Goodbye, Nedzu. Sir Night Eye said, leaving the room. The trap is closing, I suppose. I wonder if you have any tricks up your sleeve, Midoriya Izumi. Nedzu murmured to his empty office. This kind of game is no fun if you don't. Izumi felt a cold chill run up her spine as she sat in her apartment, nursing some hot soup. Did someone just step over my grave? She idly wondered as she flipped through the channels on her television. Nah, I'm probably just catching a cold. The sunrise was glorious that day, bright beams of red and purple light shooting out in a burst, heralding the arrival of the giant ball of gas Earth depends on for life. It was nothing compared to the corona surrounding Intersect, but it was still gorgeous. Izumi was perched on an old AC unit on Dagoba Beach, admiring the display as she tinkered with some old electronics. She had been lurking there for a few hours, quietly watching for any other people in the area before she started what she came there for. No one had popped up except for a few joggers here and there, and they purposefully ignored the dump. No one wants to see what they've done to a previously appealing site, do they? The teenager thought bitterly. Izumi looked around at the trash that littered the shore. There was a bit of everything: food waste and scraps, rusted machinery, broken furniture. This is gonna take a while, Izumi muttered, beginning to sort what she was closest to. Trash went into one category and what could maybe be used into another. Looking at her task, she cracked her knuckles and grinned. Let's go. The small green-haired girl began opening gates in the reality, invisible to all but her. If a pedestrian looked over for some reason at that specific moment, they'd see a young girl with fluffy green hair apparently trying to sort garbage. But Izumi was quietly throwing everything she could lift into a different portal. A motor? But it's so useful. I'ma save this. She chucked it into a portal, along with everything else she could save or use. It went like this for the next few hours, Izumi quietly evaluating what she wanted or not and getting rid of it. All right, any more today and it'll be easily noticed. New experiment. Her green eyes swept over what was still on the beach. A car? It'll do. She muttered. Izumi evaluated it for a moment and quickly opened a gate down the middle of the car, then closed it just as quickly. For a moment, nothing happened. She was ready to begin another attempt when the car simply separated where the gate once was. She stood still for a moment. What the fresh heck? Izumi walked up to it cautiously. Her hand touched the metal of the roof. A clean cut. She stayed there for a while, inspecting the damage she caused. The car was old and rusted, true, but it was solid. And now it was split perfectly down the middle. Nothing seems to be missing either. She muttered. Just not bisected? All right then. Izumi stepped back, dusting herself off. What's my limit? Hours later, Izumi staggered home feeling like she had run a marathon. Or 5. Consecutively. While juggling elephants. Why did I think that was a good idea? She ummed into her empty apartment. She grabbed a notebook that hadn't been completely filled and scribbled down a note. Energy spent is only relative to gates, not what I open them in. Her pen paused, shaking over the blank page. Backlash occurs if limits are overpassed. And with that final note, Izumi dropped the notebook and pen and collapsed into her bed, her muscles twitching as she tried to rest. Thump. Izumi blinked, confused. She had fallen asleep in her bed, so why was she in her workroom at GDD? And on her work table, no less? She sat up, looking around. It looked like her workspace. And it didn't feel like she had stepped to another reality. Dang it, I stepped in my sleep again. She concluded, hopping down from the steel slab. She netted her fingers together and stretched, feeling her vertebrae pop. Well, I might as well start on my projects, Izumi muttered sleepily. She stumbled out of the workroom to her office across the building, still not completely awake. She passed a few employees on her way there, some of them calling good morning to her. Hey, Midoriya-san. A small woman called from the front desk. She had black hair and was wearing a professional suit. I thought you'd be in later today, not at 8 in the morning. Why are you still wearing your pajamas? She added playfully. Izumi pretended to glare at her, pouting when the woman laughed at her face. Koyaku, I am a person of odd and mysterious ways. Maybe it isn't the best question to ask why, but how? She said solemnly, trying to not laugh. The other woman dramatically rolled her eyes, pointedly looking back at her computer. Such a shame, but I must return to my duties. Secretary is quite an important role, Midoriya-san. Koyaku said primly. I will return to attempting to solve this mystery later. Izumi huffed, fighting back a smile as she padded to her office. She pushed open the door and shoved aside a bookcase, exposing a small door that looked like it belonged to a safe. She looked around and upon seeing no one, shoved her arm through space to grab the contents of the compartment. She pulled out a set of clothes, quickly changed into them, and threw the pajamas back into the compartment. As she exited and went back into the lobby, she noticed a tall man with dark green hair in the lobby. Sir Night Eye, Izumi called, striding towards him. I'm so glad that I'm not in my pajamas anymore. She whispered internally. Are you here to pick up your support gear? She queried. Sir Night Eye stiffly nodded. Yes, I am. Izumi smiled and turned on her heel, leading him to the pickup room. I know it's been a few days since your appointment, but you do have priority. Seeing the hero raise an eyebrow, she elaborated. Using your quirk is probably very obvious. If a villain knows who you are and your quirk, and you use it on them, she trailed off, but they both knew what she meant. Sir Night Eye could be exposed as being a hero in front of a villain who could have an extremely destructive quirk. Anyways, they're ready. The words petered out in the empty void that suddenly engulfed the hallway. The clicking of shoes was the only sound for a long few minutes. Finally, the green-haired duo reached the pickup area. Izumi opened the door and ushered Sir Night Eye in, and walked up to the steel counter along the wall. There was a steel case, about the size of a regular eyeglasses case, resting on the slab. Here you go, Sir Night Eye. Izumi said cheerfully, passing him the case. He inspected the case, then opened it and did the same to his gear. It looked like a regular pair of glasses, a sleek metal frame with rectangular lenses. Are these support gear? He asked, staring at them incredulously. Izumi bristled angrily. Yes. They're supposed to look inconspicuous for a reason, sir. She said politely, the last word sounding like it left a bad taste in her mouth. That's what we are known for. Quality designs that are easy to use and convenient for our customers. After a few moments, Sir Night Eye inclined his head. You're right. I apologize. Izumi smiles. It's fine. Are you happy with your gear? You can test it here if you want to. He shook his head. No, I think this will be perfect. Thank you. Sir Night Eye repacked the case and Izumi handed him the necessary papers and such he would sign or keep for his gear. As he filled out the forms, Izumi became aware that he kept staring at her. Finally, her temper exploded. What is the issue, Sir Night Eye? She said defensively. Why are you staring? He didn't even look embarrassed. You should see if you can talk to UA's support course. This company is the kind they want to be eventually hired by. Why not see what the students are like? Sir Night Eye asked. I'll see. She said quietly. As he handed her the papers, picked up his gear and was preparing to leave when he turned and looked at her again. UA is a school for heroes, and as such, they are dedicated. Sir Night Eye stated. Izumi raised an eyebrow. I'm sure they are. She said neutrally. They will rise to any challenge you set them. He said in that infuriatingly calm tone. Of course, I would be disappointed if they wouldn't. They're going to be trying to keep up and support those who are out saving others and getting the bad guys. Izumi shot back. That's my job right now too. Of course. As he left, he handed her a flyer. Just consider it, please. As he walked out of the building, Izumi looked over the inconspicuous piece of paper. It detailed an interview day for the support course, where companies would go and scout students to try and get them to join the company after they graduate. It seemed very convenient. She sighed, folding up the piece of paper. It was a good idea. Maybe she could send someone from the design department to talk to them. There was no way that those students would think she was a company owner. Yeah, they would be able to think she could work with the company as her as an actual employee, but not as the boss. She put the paper on her desk as she passed by her office on the way to the workshop. It was time to finish Mirio's gear instead of worrying over what-ifs. 5 hours later, Izumi found herself looking back over the flyer. The event would be in 2 weeks, which would give her plenty of time to test out the fake Tintin's gear, catch up on her other orders, and prepare someone to give a presentation. I guess I can do it, she muttered, scratching her chin. I could organize a presentation, get someone in design to go, and have them drop off Mirio's suit while they are at UA. She started nodding ferociously. Yes, I'll do that. Izumi stretched in her office. The designer had been briefed and sent to UA with Mirio's suit and a presentation for the support course. She had gotten no panicked phone calls, nor any reality-destroying migraines. All in all, life was rather nice. Even the weather was good today. Bright skies, fluffy white clouds. Maybe if I finish work early, I can go to the beach. She thought optimistically. Her efforts had cleared the beach up by quite a bit, and trash wasn't returning to the area. The shore was returning to how it used to look. All future plans abruptly shattered when Izumi's work phone started ringing. She froze mid-stretch, her arms still above her head. Please let it be a telemarketer. The girl grumbled, digging through the debris strewn around her desk. I don't want to deal with UA and their pushy teachers and faculty. The phone was eventually located and answered. Hello. Midoriya-san. Her main designer's tearful voice broke through the phone's speaker. Is there an issue? Are you all right, Tachibana? Izumi asked, worried. They want you here. I accidentally mentioned how you handled all of the final designs and engineering, and now they want you to talk to them. The tinny female voice squeaked apologetically. What? Who's they? Izumi was very confused now. The support course. Hellions, the lot of them. So they're rioting or something? Or something. Half of them are yelling about the affordability of high-quality gear, and they're attracting the management course like a dead cow would flies. Izumi sighed, rubbing her face. And the other half? Are staring at me and messing with something that's sparking. A lot. Help me. Tachibana frantically whispered. I think they're making a taser. A weary smile crossed Izumi's face. Hold on. I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll swap spots with you. She hung up as Tachibana babbled about evil mechanical children who were staring with murder in their eyes. All she wanted was a quiet day at the beach, dang it. Why can't I have a quiet day to myself? She thought, slowly packing her backpack. Heckity hecking heck. I wanna sleep. And maybe grab some hero merch. And watch a hero fight. Izumi threw her pack over her shoulder and headed out of the door, determined to get whatever she had to do done. Off to the trenches, Midoriya-san? A teasing voice from the front desk asked. UA, Koyaku. Izumi said without turning around. So, trenches? No, not really. The girl finally said as she reached the doors. As she left the building, she waved to the woman. See you later. Bye. That I forgot how tacky this place looks. Izumi muttered under her breath. It had taken her a while to walk to UA, and she had been greeted by the bright glare of sunlight against their signature buildings. Standing in front of the school's gates in the middle of a school day, Izumi imagined she looked a tad out of place. Taking into account she was wearing a button-up shirt and slacks, she looked more like a teacher or a young business person than a kid who should still be in middle school. Green curls had been tamed into a thick braid, and her signature backpack was slung over her shoulder. Midoriya Izumi was ready for battle. As she approached the gate, she saw a flash of movement from inside of the school's campus. It turned into a streak, barreling towards her as fast as it possibly could. Izumi spun to the side at the last possible moment, and the mystery thing crashed into the ground where she was standing a few moments before. Please don't do that, Tachibana-san. You'll end up hurting yourself somehow. She sighed, poking the crumpled figure on the ground with her foot. You're wearing nice clothes too. Don't ruin 'em. You're mean, Zuzu. Tachibana ummed, rolling onto her back. Get off of the sidewalk. You're a representative of Green Diamond Designs. A small smile curled the girl's lips. Do I need some kind of pass to talk to the students? Tachibana lifted her arm melodramatically, pointing at the entrance to UA. They saw I was leaving and followed me. Power Loader kinda meandered after the horde. Maybe you could take my pass and lecture them there. Izumi looked to where Tachibana was pointing and spotted about 15 students staring at her, laser focus in their eyes. One had a sparking metal gadget in his hands, and another had long hair that looked like the strands were made of some kind of metal alloy. All the others were whispering to their fellow students, but their eyes were locked on Izumi's face. CRP. Exactly. Did you at least give Togata-san his suit? He passed by before I was supposed to start talking to the support course. He looked a bit like a kicked puppy when he saw it was me. Tachibana lifted up her arm and shot Izumi a look. He told me to thank you. Many times. I think I saw him cry a bit too. He needed a suit. Izumi shrugged. Well, good luck, Bean Sprout. Tachibana said, suddenly lurching up and patting Izumi's head before fleeing down the street, away from UA. Izumi turned towards the students and Power Loader, all of them still eerily focused on her. Well, there's no time like the present. She cautiously walked over to the gate, nervously watching the kids. I'd rather step into a warhorde again. 5,000 berserkers have nothing on smart kids. They know when they're being misled. Berserkers? You could tell them the sky was an enemy and they'd try to kill it. She grumbled morosely to herself. Izumi stopped at the gate and raised her hand, trying to greet the people assembled there. Hello. My name is Midoriya Izumi. I'm from Green Diamond Designs like Tachibana-san. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes. Then the small metal gadget that the students stopped sparking. Dumb. Is that thing supposed to do that? Izumi ventured, nervously looking at the metal amalgamation that could maybe be called a machine. No. The students all chorused while giving her an evil stare. Can I take a look at it? She asked, perking up at the idea of looking at some machinery she didn't know about. Fine. The boy holding whatever it was trudged forward, shooting Izumi what could only be called a murderous glare. But that was a harsh contrast with the surprising gentleness he showed as he put the tiny device into Izumi's hands. Don't mess it up. Got it. Izumi muttered, already turning it over and inspecting it. What the purpose of this gadget? She looked up, catching his glare. It's supposed to send circuit-frying electric shock onto whatever it touches as soon as it's activated. The boy said, completely straight-faced. Izumi froze, staring down at the mess of wires and metal plating nervously. Is this going to zap me as soon as I start fiddling with it? Some of those wires don't look insulated. She croaked. The battery's been drained. Oh, all right then, Izumi said, relaxing. She popped open what looked like the power unit, ignoring the strangled screech from the student. Hush, I'm only looking at the battery. Didn't you just complain that it was drained? Either your device is terribly energy inefficient or your battery is bad and leaking power. The latter might explain why it's sparking, so I'm inspecting it. Izumi looked at the student who gave her the device. Remember that you can always replace malfunctioning or dead cells. Just be careful. Explosions aren't fun, and neither are a few of the components of batteries. You're a support course student, so I expect you have a few tricks and ideas up your sleeve. See, here's the problem. She pulled out a small piece of deformed, blackened metal. Some of your wires somehow fused into this thing. Messed up the connections. She passed the gadget back to the boy and looked to the main group, all of which were much less hostile. I guess I proved myself somehow? Midoriya-san, do you want to come to our workshops and talk to the students there? Power Loader asked, emerging from the horde of technophiles. I think I can get you a visitor's pass so you can enter the campus. Izumi smiled, internally screaming. I would love to. As Power Loader ambled back to the main buildings and the student to their classrooms/workshops, Izumi leaned on the gate and began yelling at herself mentally. This was a dumb idea. You know not to involve yourself with UA again. They'll drag you in and be so generally stupid and hopeless you'll be compelled to stay. Heckity hecking heck. Power Loader reappeared and triumphantly handed Izumi a visitor's pass. Let's go. My students are always eager to learn from someone who knows what they're talking about. He started dragging Izumi to where the support course had their lair. They've been alone for more than 5 minutes, so we'll need to be careful re-entering the classroom. Sometimes, their devices aren't exactly safe in the testing phase. The teacher trailed off ominously. Should we hurry? Izumi muttered. Yes. My students are geniuses, and that's dangerous sometimes. Power Loader sounded resigned, almost, which scared Izumi maybe more than it should have. Lead the way. You work at a support company? How do you create the designs? Where do you find suppliers? Are there specialty firms for support companies? Do you draw clients through word of mouth or ad campaigns? Izumi would say that she wasn't anticipating this kind of barrage from the support students, but she was. It was why she didn't want to go to UA for the interview day in the first place. Too many questions. One at a time, please. I think I heard someone ask about suppliers for support companies. Izumi wheezed, trying half-heartedly to hide behind the podium. At least there's an advantage to being short sometimes. She thought bitterly. Yeah. UA has a specialty contract with companies that supply materials to bulk manufacturers and some other contracts for finer machinery. How do support companies get their stuff? A student yelled from the back. We also form contracts with supply companies. Probably not on the scale that UA does, but we do value our materials. Izumi responded dryly. How old is your company? The company I work at, which is named Green Diamond Designs, is only 2 years old. However, it has an excellent reputation and is expanding quickly. The girl said. It had already been an hour of relentless questioning, and the students showed no sign of slowing down. Izumi was half convinced they were eating coffee beans whenever she looked away from them. What's your job? I help the designers occasionally and help heroes pick up their gear, along with a few other duties in the company. Izumi said quickly, waving her hands around. It's not very integral to the company, but I see and help a lot of the departments. Is it cool? Izumi looked at the person and raised an eyebrow. I mean, do you enjoy your job? I don't want to burn out in a sweatshop. My job is enjoyable, but it is also taxing. Izumi said slowly, picking her words carefully. Knowing that heroes depend on GDD's equipment to do their jobs correctly is nerve-wracking, and you would always be nervous. You will constantly second-guess your work and pray that nothing goes wrong while they are being used because then it is your fault if they are hurt. However, heroes depend on us. Depend on support companies to do their jobs well and to the best of their ability. The least we can do in return is give them our best with our full confidence in our product's capabilities. She raised her emerald head, bright eyes that seemed too old for her apparent age staring at each one in the room in turn. Do you all understand what I am telling you? One by one, the support students nodded or murmured their assent. Izumi tiredly smiled. Anything else? She asked coolly, dragging loose tendrils of hair away from her face. The person before you, Tachibana-san, said you managed all of the final designs and making the gear. Do you? Izumi sighed. I look over everything using a little thing called common sense. Basically, I point out what couldn't work or what could potentially go wrong and I fix it. I also make everything, but they don't need to know that. She added silently. After a couple more questions, the students seemed to be finished with their interrogation session. I think they're done for today, Midoriya-san. Power Loader grumbled from his perch in the workshop. That little speech of yours just gave them a collective existential crisis, I'm afraid. Oops. Sorry, everyone. Izumi said apologetically. I didn't mean to do that. Existential crises should occur much later in your career unless you've had one already. Power Loader coughed. Your pass expires in a few minutes. Izumi nodded furiously. I nearly forgot. She stared back at the students intensely. You are all accomplished inventors and engineers already. I look forward to seeing your future exploits, and Green Diamond Designs would be glad to employ any of you. A small smile broke out onto her face. Have a good day, everyone. I think that went well, Izumi chirped as Power Loader walked her to the entrance of UA. What do you think? The teacher sent her a sidelong glare, half-heartedly sighing. I'd heard that you could be a troublemaker, but you didn't incite my students to anarchy. That's always a good thing. Are they usually prone to anarchy? She asked playfully. One of them almost started a riot when one of the other teachers mentioned how much regulation their gear is under and how stringent the government is with their policies regarding support gear. Power Loader muttered darkly. We lost nearly half of the workshop that day. The duo finished their little hike in silence until Power Loader quietly sighed and turned to Izumi. I heard you helped Togata-kun with his little costume issue? Izumi quietly grinned. His new suit should be able to phase with him and is very durable. Power Loader let out a sound that either sounded like a whistle or a kettle letting off steam. Impressive. I should hope so. Suddenly, they were at the gate. Here's your pass, Power Loader-san. Thank you for having me today. Izumi passed the plastic card back to the hero. It was the support class's pleasure. Please come again. He responded, taking the pass. As Izumi turned to leave, a large envelope was suddenly shoved at her. Netsu-san told me to give this to you. Power Loader explained. Also, he asked me to ask you this. At Izumi's questioning look, he finally blurted out. Would you come to UA when you are old enough as a support student? Or as a student at all, really dash? Hold on. Power Loader quickly shut up, seeing the rather dangerous look on Izumi's face. I've already graduated high school. I don't have any need for enrollment in UA. Izumi said coldly. Tell Netsu-san I said thank you for offering, but I do not wish to become a student in UA. Power Loader gulped. All right then. At least take the envelope, though. He added hastily, seeing Izumi turn to leave. She grabbed the envelope and stomped out of UA's campus, heading home. Her workday was already done and she was free to do as she pleased. Dagoba Beach was already mostly cleared, and it was a cooler day outside, so Izumi didn't want to go there. Sighing, she headed home, considering the heavy envelope in her small, calloused hands. I might as well see what it says, Izumi muttered as she sat on her couch, staring at the thick paper. As soon as she said that, a buzzing started to fill her brain. What? She dropped the envelope like it was on fire, but the telltale buzzing was enveloping her entire head, making her eyes water from the sensation of crawling static. Whatever was in that envelope was going to mess with her and everything she was. Netsu-san made this, so he has something to do with this. She said softly. A migraine was already sinking its claws into her brain, rendering Izumi groggy and pained. What do I have to lose? She asked the ceiling rhetorically, before ripping open the envelope and picking up some of the papers that it had revealed. She scanned half of the first page before stopping and blinking a few times. She reread the passage and put down the paper. Oh. Well, this is an issue. The letter had started out rather bluntly. Dear Midoriya Izumi, it has come to our attention that you have either an unregistered quirk or have used the quirk of an unknown third party in a public area with no license. As you know, this is a violation of quirk usage laws. Because this is your first issue with said laws, you have two options at this point. First, you will receive a citation on your record for illegal quirk usage in a public place and you will be required to pay a fine, which would be determined at a mandatory court appointment with your parents. Your quirk record will also be updated to reflect that you do have a quirk in spite of your toe joint if you have said quirk. Or, you have the opportunity to attempt to participate in a new program in UA. Because it is possible the quirk used is not yours and UA is a highly competitive school, you would be required to undergo tests to assure you do have enough potential to participate in the program, regardless of quirk status. Izumi snorted. Geez, they're not even being subtle. They really want me at UA, I guess. Crafty little thing, he's even making a quirk test part of the requirements. She sighed, rubbing her face. But if I refuse to go to UA, I won't be able to work at GDD. I'd have to wait for 3 months until I was determined safe to work around equipment. Stupid archaic law system. Would I have to go to school as a student even? I've already graduated from high school. Izumi stared back at the paper and continued reading it. If you do not show yourself as deserving of the opportunity at UA, you will be subject to the first option. If you wish to participate in the second option, mail this form back along with your decision. You will be contacted with further instructions as soon as the request is processed. Muzutafu Quirk Registry and Enforcement Office. The girl's eye subconsciously twitched as she stared at the paper. CRP. She grabbed a pen and started to fill out the forms. I can't do the first option. Father's been away since I was a little kid, and Mom's been away working for a while. It'd be an inconvenience to her if she had to come back just for a court date. Second option it is, then. She froze. I'm gonna have to go to UA. A minute, Sunshine Boy is not gonna leave me alone if I get in. Izumi stared down at the form, debating if she should choose the first option. Telling her mother she had spontaneously somehow developed a quirk and apparently broke the law versus going to a school that basically teaches its pupils how to attack others and be martyrs. Imminent death by maternal unit versus high school. Mom scares me more, Izumi decided, filling out the last of the paper, cementing her decision to go to the tests so she could attend the program at UA. The other papers were mostly payment to green diamond designs for Mirio's suit and a small metal disc that was blinking kinda suspiciously. Izumi bopped it cautiously with her finger and watched, bemused, as UA's logo popped up in a projection. It stayed in the air, then suddenly morphed to an image of All Might in a grotesque yellow suit that somehow looked moderately acceptable on him. He was standing behind a wooden desk, and as Izumi stared at the picture, Netsu popped into view. Hello, Midoriya-san. If you haven't seen the papers for you from Yuzutafu's Quirk Agency, I advise you look at them immediately. The little white creature paused for a moment, smiling placidly as All Might shifted and coughed into his fist in the background. All Might is probably missing some organs, judging by the way he's coughing, Izumi thought as she waited for Netsu to resume speaking. I guess All for One is a threat here too. I knew he and All Might fought in some other realities, but it's still shocking to see the symbol of peace cough up blood. So, you have two options. Netsu finally squeaked, clapping his hands. You can suffer a legal penalty and a fine for using an unregistered quirk, along with being suspended from working until you're cleared by the authorities, which can take several months. Izumi quietly grumbled under her breath. I know that. Or you could come to UA for our program. Unfortunately, we cannot tell you much at the moment, but if you would at least attend the initial session, we would be able to explain much more. Izumi pushed the off button before he could continue, moodily staring at it. She shifted her hand through a tiny portal and grabbed her toolbox, setting it on her couch next to her. You have displeased me. Prepare to be destroyed, she told the projector, digging through the huge box. She began disassembling the machine automatically, not paying attention to what she was doing as she thought about what was going on. Either she would try to get into the UA program, which would be stupid, or tell her mom she now had a quirk, which is a different breed of stupid. Izumi could also say someone had used their quirk, but that would be debatably worse. Midoriya Inko was many things. Intelligent, caring, willing to do what she thinks is right. But if there is one thing she is not, it is stupid. Anyone who believes she is insane. So yeah, there is no turning back. Damn it. I need to talk to Korba, Izumi muttered, running her hands through her hair. They always have some kind of advice for this kind of thing. She quickly threw her weight forward, pitching off of the couch, face pointing directly at the floor. At the last second, she dove through the reality membrane and into a new dimension. In hindsight, setting a collision course for the ground was not a good idea. Neither was aiming for a rough destination instead of where Korba was. Nomads always had a general idea where others were, but it wasn't precise, which is how Izumi knew she was kind of near Korba, as in within 5 miles or so. Oh yes, Izumi. Let's just faceplant into the middle of Korba's homeworld and hope there aren't any Tiyuka nearby. What an excellent plan. Izumi growled to herself as she remembered Korba's stories of the huge predatory worms. She clumsily got to her feet, adjusting to the added gravity and floating boulder islands in the sky. Thick red grass brushed against her calves and cushioned her feet as the girl stared at the sky. It was a pale purple, with the wind in different hues twisting across the horizons as a faint song was emitted from them. Well, at least I know where they are now. That's Korba's voice in the wind. Izumi looked around for a way to get to the levitating masses in the sky. Foresight would be a lovely thing to have right now. That or flight. Seeing nothing, she sighed. Fine. She disappeared for a moment, only to reappear on top of the largest floating island. She continued to teleport between the chunks of floating earth, tracking the sound of Korba's song until she reached its origin. Korba was sitting on a large boulder floating in the sky, surrounded by thick red vegetation as they sang quietly to themselves and wove something in all of their hands. Izumi quietly landed behind them and snuck up, grinning to herself all the while. "Oh, Korba," she sang as she crept up behind the figure. "Guess who it is dash." "Hello, Izumi," Korba said, not even turning to look at the girl behind them. "How are you?" Izumi walked to Korba's side and flopped down onto the soft red grass, dangling her legs over the side of the rock. "I have no idea right now. Apparently, someone saw me step dash," Korba choked. "I thought you said you had taken additional precautions to never be observed." They squeaked out. "I did and I thought it worked." Izumi ummed. "But now I have to either get a legal notice and stuff or I have to go to UA for some kind of new program." "What is UA?" Korba asked, turning to face Izumi fully, two sets of hands nervously wringing as their black hair flowed around them. "Oh right. I forgot, I never told you. Remember how I told you almost everyone in my home reality has some kind of power or something?" Izumi said hesitantly. "Yes." Korba responded suspiciously. "Well, some people with strong or useful powers become heroes, who save and help civilians and catch villains. Villains are bad guys, by the way." The girl quickly explained. UA is a school that's supposed to teach high schoolers with those powers to become heroes. Korba's head tilted to the side, looking at the greenette questioningly. "Did you not say you finished high school last time we met?" "I did. I have absolutely no idea what they're planning," Izumi admitted reluctantly. "That's why I came. I need advice, Korba." Korba sighed. "I suggest you try to stay mostly unnoticed. Do they know you can step? They think it's a power, like what so many people there have." Izumi responded. "Then act like that is what stepping is. Unless you already have a different strategy in mind." They asked. Yes." Korba raised an eyebrow. "I kinda suggested that maybe someone else had the power? Do you know who you will say has this power?" Korba suggested, smiling as Izumi paled. "CRP." The girl muttered. "No." "Well, do you have a different option from going to this program?" "The alternative is the legal notice," Izumi said, covering her face with her hands. Korba poked her shoulder. "What's so bad about that?" Korba asked teasingly. "I doubt prison is an option. I'd have to pay a fine, which isn't a big deal. But then I wouldn't be able to work until I'm legally cleared, and that could take a long time. Especially considering that my company doesn't, donate money for a faster inspection and clearance." Izumi said, her eyebrows drawing together as she stared at the purple sky. "That's it?" "Korba." Izumi stared at her friend, who was honestly more like an older sibling or parent by now. "That's not good." She dropped her gaze, looking at the large red plane below their floating rock. "Besides, I'd have to bring both my mom and dad to the court hearing to have all of that arranged. And you know why I can't do that." "You're right, I apologize," Korba said formally, placing their hands on the ground and inclining their head. Izumi huffed, lowering her head also. "It's fine. Any other ideas on what I should do?" Izumi asked quietly. Korba hummed quietly, peering down at the planes along with Izumi. "Was any other information given to you?" The question floated into the wind, winding its way into the air like the being's song had just a few minutes before. "Yes? Kind of. Netsu-san, the principal, mentioned some kind of session? If I go to that, I could probably decide completely, but I don't know if I could change my choice." She admitted sheepishly. Korba's hands slowly began twisting, their forehead furrowed. Will you be safe?" Korba finally asked. Their voice was suspiciously blank of any emotion. Izumi looked at her friend, her face sad. "I don't know, honestly. I think Nedzu was experimented on at some point and he obviously despises humans on some level, so he could either refuse to let anyone experiment on me or he could not care. And he'll be at least partially responsible for me. And then there's the police too, but I don't know about them. I think as long as I'm careful, I won't be discovered or hurt. And if worst comes to worst, I can step away. Izumi said reassuringly. She paused for a moment. Well, I guess I just answered my own question? Korba smiled. That is nice. Oh, have you seen any Tayuka lately? I want to know what they look like. Izumi said excitedly, searching for one of her notebooks. You've only told me about them, I've never seen one before. I am not leading you to a giant predator so you can take notes about it as it attempts to devour you, Izumi, Korba said dryly. Are you sure? Izumi said, staring intently at the plains of ruby grass beneath their floating island. Yes. Hey, Koyaku? Izumi said. She was back in her apartment, sitting on the couch as she fiddled with a disassembled remote in her hands. The call was silent for a few moments, and then she heard the secretary respond. What did you do? You never sound like this unless you've done something very embarrassing. Can I use it as blackmail? Koyaku said teasingly, an undercurrent of tension running through her voice. Apparently I have manifested a teleportation quirk and have broken the law. The teenager said flatly. There was a brief silence. I thought you told me you were quirkless? The woman finally asked. Izumi grunted. I am. So, why do they think it's your quirk? I have no idea. The girl responded, viciously poking at the remote's batteries. There's no way I could have a quirk. Well, there is one way, but they probably think he's dead. So, what's going to happen? I'm not going to be able to work for a while. Can GD manage without me? Izumi asked. Koyaku sighed into the receiver. I don't know. You design most everything and make it too, save a few things that have been made before. Maybe if we shut down making new orders until you're cleared and just repair support gear, we can be fine. So? Izumi asked. So that's what we'll do. Green Diamond will be fine. Take a break, boss. You need it. The woman advised before hanging up. Izumi stared at the phone in her hand. Well, CRP. She blinked a few times. I guess I'll wait for news about the program or whatever? No one answered her. Tap tap tap. Izumi blearily opened her eyes, cuddled into a massive pile of blankets. Tap tap tap. She lurched out of bed, trudging to her closet. I'll be right there. She yelled. Izumi threw on some clothes and went to the front door, opening it and seeing Eraserhead? And right next to him, presently, hello, 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 little listener. The voice hero boomed, energetically smiling and gesturing. Izumi stared at him, letting the insanity and horrors she saw reflect themselves in her eyes. It's 6 a.m, you cretin, Izumi informed him waspishly. The man's cheesy grin faltered as he shot a bewildered glance at his companion. Come in. I have coffee. The girl threw open the door, waving the heroes inside. She slammed the door shut and headed for her coffee maker, throwing in everything needed before setting it to start brewing the wonderful elixir of life known as coffee. When she turned back around, Eraserhead was holding the note her mother had left her. Put that down. She snapped angrily. The man stared at her, keeping eye contact as he placed it back onto the kitchen table. Sorry, he said gruffly. Izumi huffed, turning back to the coffee maker. It's fine. What are you doing here so early? She said quietly, changing the subject. The boss man told us to bring you to UA for an informational session. Present Mike said cheerfully. At 6 a.m? Izumi said incredulously. He said you might need to be convinced, so we should show up early. The hero said blithely. Izumi stared at him again, then turned back to the coffee maker and pouring some out once it beeped. Do either of you want coffee? She asked. Sure. Present Mike cheered. Fine, Eraserhead muttered, burying his face into his scarves. The awkward silence descended again as coffee was distributed. Finally, Eraserhead spoke up. Where are your parents? He asked, his voice indifferent. Izumi stiffened, staring at the erasure hero. Working. Why do you ask? She responded cautiously. It's kinda weird when a kid answers the front door, not an adult. Present Mike chimed in, his green eyes too sharp for Izumi's liking. She shrugged defensively. My dad's been away since I was little, and my mom is working at a hospital. I'm used to being alone. Eraserhead sighed, putting down his completely empty coffee mug. We should be going. Nedzu doesn't have much time in his day and school starts soon, so we need to be on time. Izumi nodded quietly, staring at the table. Any advice? She asked jokingly. Don't lie, both heroes said flatly. Present Mike shuddered in his leather jacket. Just don't. It isn't worth it. Izumi blinked. Okay then. She quickly collected the mugs and placed them in the sink, then turned to the heroes. Shall we go? The trio quickly rushed out of the apartment building, Present Mike muttering English under his breath as they speed-walked down the streets. Need to grade those quizzes. And make new exercises. Izumi tried to tune him out, focusing on what could possibly happen. What would Nedzu ask? An informational meeting could be useful, but what would the information be? She barely noticed as they stopped in front of UA's gaudy buildings, just starting to shine in the morning's light. Come on, we'll take you to Nedzu's office. Eraserhead grumbled, handing her a visitor's pass and swiping his ID at the gate scanner. Follow me. He began walking to the main building, leaving Izumi to trail after him. Well dang. She thought as she followed him to what was presumably her imminent doom. Hello. Izumi stopped and stared at the figure of UA's principal after she had basically been shoved into the office by an exhausted Eraserhead. The tiny mammal continued. Welcome to UA. So, you're interested in our program? Yes. Izumi offered. Excellent, excellent. May I offer you some tea? He asked, waving at the teapot next to him merrily. All right, she said, bemused. He passed her a teacup, which she held delicately as she stared at the principal. He stared right back, not flinching or blinking. So, Izumi trailed off. If you don't mind, I have some questions for you. Nedzu said happily. Izumi swallowed, Present Mix and Eraserhead's advice echoing in her head. Don't lie. All right, she finally said. Fire away. How did you open your own company at such a young age? That was unexpected. I've designed support gear when I saw heroes on TV since I was little. I eventually made some using stuff I found and entered it into a contest. It worked really well and I won a prize. I used the money to start the company, but I want to keep it pretty small until I'm older. Izumi said, curious. Why? I wanted to know. Nedzu explained. How about this? I'll answer one of your questions for every one of mine you answer. I can live with that, Izumi answered, sipping her tea. This is really good. Thank you. Now, your first question? What does the program here mean for me? The girl asked. Well, you would be enrolled as a student of UA, and you would be part of a course so you would be monitored. Your quirk would be tested and you would learn how to control it appropriately while you stayed under our surveillance. As a student, Izumi said accusingly. As a student, Nedzu confirmed. Fine. Why are you so sure I have a quirk instead of someone else? The toe joint test says I can't. Izumi grumbled, sipping her tea. Call it a hunch. Why are you so seclusive? You are young and successful, but apparently alone. Why? Nedzu probed. Izumi shrugged. Others don't really understand why I like making things instead of wanting to be a hero. It's exhausting and annoying, so I limit my social interactions. Or at least I try to. Nedzu chuckled under his breath. Yes, someone like me. Someone who doesn't want to interact with people. Someone with good taste. Come child, let me show you my tea collection. What? What? Ahem. Do you have anything else to ask? Nedzu said, cackling internally as he plotted how to convince Izumi into becoming a tea connoisseur. I'm sure you already know this, but I've graduated high school already. What's the purpose of me being there and taking up a valuable spot? Izumi asked, her green eyes narrowing even more as she stared at the hyper-intelligent creature in front of her. Nedzu shrugged. Because of many things. I can't tell you most of them because of privacy concerns, But no, you won't be wasting your opportunity. Unless you decide to waste it intentionally, of course. He stared at her pointedly. You won't waste it, will you? Izumi could hear the threat, and for once, she listened to it. I'll do my best, Nedzu-sensei. She paused. Can I ask to be in a specific class? No, Nedzu said flatly, sipping his tea. I have no more questions. Do you? None that will be answered, I think. Are we finished? Izumi asked respectfully, absent-mindedly rubbing her teacup. I believe so, Nedzu answered. Your test to enter UA will be in a few months, so try to be careful in the meantime. Izumi laughed. Ah, and I was planning on robbing the Louvre. Don't please. Nedzu waved a paw to the door. I believe you know the way out? Yes. Thank you, sir. Izumi got up, only just remembering to replace the teacup onto Nedzu's desk. I'll be on my way. She left the office and quickly exited the building, avoiding the classrooms and groups of chattering students, and headed back to her apartment. Dagoba Beach became Izumi's refuge after a few weeks. The garbage dumps hid her from public eyes, and there was enough loose metal to make an alarm so Izumi would know someone was watching her. But in the past few weeks, enough debris had been dislodged to make Izumi a tad wary. And now, she was sure there were others there too. If the constant noise of shifting garbage wasn't enough, quiet voices and other noises were making frequent appearances. Normally, this wouldn't make Izumi angry, but now she was trying to train her weird nomadness beyond the control she had over it. And the probable constant surveillance was whittling down her patience, little by little. So, she planted a camera. Or 2. Or 36. Overkill wasn't a word in her vocabulary by this point. And just because she feels extremely petty, glue balloons and glitter bombs. In that order. The cameras captured it all wonderfully. A hero she barely recognizes crept up in the dump and trips a wire, causing a mechanism to pop a glue balloon, dousing the hero, and a glitter bomb detonating and covering the man with a giant cloud of glitter. After that, the heroes either stopped coming or started getting sneakier. Izumi's cameras stopped picking up heroes, and the green-haired girl didn't hear any more people. She could practice and MSTR her abilities in peace. All was good for the next few months. Hey, 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 little listener. Someone screeches behind Izumi. Startled, she jabs behind her with a bony elbow, hitting something solid, and tries to skitter away. It wasn't exactly successful. Let me go. She yells before turning around to look at who grabbed her arm. Oh shit. Present Mike was holding onto her arm, and judging by the look on his face, she had elbowed him in the stomach. Oops. Well, do you usually hit people in the gut? The voice hero finally wheezed out. Do you usually sneak up behind people and scream at them? Izumi shot back. Yes, Present Mike painfully responded. That's kinda how I fight villains. Oh. The pair stood there for a few minutes, waiting for Present Mike to catch his breath. So, what's up? The man finally asks, eyeing Izumi like she would attack him. The sky. Let go of my arm. She says drilly, trying to tug her arm away for emphasis. Oh right. Sorry. Present Mike let go of her arm. You know, the entrance exam is in a few weeks. Ready for it? Izumi rolls her eyes, crossing her arms. I'll be fine. Probably land in general studies, because there's no way a quirkless kid can be a hero, according to society. Present Mike smiles sympathetically. And before Nedzu, no animal was a hero. Izumi stares at him. He's a hyper-intelligent being that I'm kind of sure started as a creepypasta, but someone decided to make him real. I also think he consumes the hopes and dreams of his students in the form of tea, but that's irrelevant. She can't tell for sure, but she thinks Present Mike is laughing. I don't know what to say to counter that. Izumi shrugs. Don't look at me. What do you want? Present Mike laughs nervously. It's more like a giggle, to be honest. You looked upset? So you screamed? The gem on Izumi's back started humming, like someone's tapping her on the shoulder and saying, you can run if this gets bad. The hero started looking guilty. Why are you doing it in the first place? Izumi stared at him and began tapping her foot. It's rude and startling, especially if the person isn't used to others sneaking up on them or dislikes loud noises. Sorry. Present, Mike muttered. The girl nodded. Thank you. So, what do you really want? The hero seemed to deflate. Honestly, to wish you good luck and apologize. I know you don't want to come to UA and Nedzu is making you. I hope that eventually, you'll come to enjoy your time there. Izumi sighed and looked away. People want me to be something I'm not. I've never liked that. So, I don't know for certain if I'll be able to enjoy my time there. I'll try though. She smiled at the hero. I guess I'll see you at the exams. Izumi looks at the buildings of UA and wonders just when her life went so out of control. Probably when she let herself be seen. Too bad she couldn't erase memories. She was so absorbed in her head that she tripped and nearly fell, but something hit her on the back and she stopped. Sorry I used my quirk on you, but I didn't want you to fall. It's bad luck. A voice rang out cheerfully. Izumi twisted around and saw a girl. Uraraka Ochako. One of Izumi's best friends in other universes, but here, they're not supposed to know the other. Izumi's heart twists, but she put on a happy smile. Thanks. I would have fallen if you hadn't intervened. Thank you and good luck. She scrambled up after Uraraka released her from the quirk and got to the registration table. I'm Midoriya Izumi, trying for something? One of the people looked at her sympathetically and handed her a small temporary ID for the building. Heroics, dear. You'll take the exam in the hall over there. The rest of the information is on the badge. Thanks, Izumi murmured as she clips on the ID and walked into the exam room, finding a seat in a far corner. She quietly watched as others filed in, noting a few people that she had met in other realities who had made it into UA. Would they still be the same as they are everywhere else? Would there be traitors this time, or would there be none? The girl would be lying if she said she wasn't a small bit excited by the possibility of seeing her friends again, even though they technically weren't her friends here. And Izumi could see her friends again, leave this world behind, but this world was still home. Izumi sighed, letting go of what she expected of the people here. It would be unfair to compare them to those she already knew. The girl half listened to present Mick's explanation of the exams and the practical exam setup. Personally, she thought the practical was insanely stupid, basing itself on raw strength and powerful quirks. Even if you had a wonderful quirk for rescue or healing, you wouldn't be able to get into the hero course the traditional way. Maybe they want the non-combative students to beat the robots to their mechanical deaths? Sounds pretty nasty. Hold on, is Nedzu trying to force her to show a quirk so she won't fail out of the exams and be stuck with the other option? That's sneaky little. Izumi was almost impressed. Almost. She would have been if she wasn't the target of his planning. The paper exams were almost too easy to Izumi. She had graduated high school a long time ago, so all of the things tested she had known for years. But then there was a section of questions at the back. There is a villain in a public area. They appear to have a speed quirk and have already incapacitated several heroes. Civilians are still around, and the villain is becoming increasingly violent. What is your course of action? There has been a multi-vehicle collision in the middle of a busy road. How do you proceed? They went on and on. Izumi answered as best as she could, saying which heroes would be most effective and how to rescue and help anyone there, but at the same time she felt like she was at a disadvantage. The questions seemed to be asking how she would respond with her non-existent quirk. It technically made sense, considering most people taking the exam had quirks, but a lot of them weren't strictly combat or rescue-oriented. Creative thinking was a requirement for hero work, due to heroes' specialties and quirks often not precisely lining up with the situation. But this was asking what she would do with her quirk. I would evacuate the civilians to a safe location. If possible, Izumi begins to respond. Then I would try to talk to the villain down from their actions. Violence is not always strictly necessary when confronting villains. If necessary, I could attempt to either stall or incapacitate the villain until help arrives. She considers the second question. It seems moderately straightforward, at least. I would stop or redirect traffic so the chance of more accidents would be lowered, and attempt to assess the victims. If they are not safe to be moved, I would wait for EMTs to arrive so they could do their jobs. If they are safe to be moved with no severe or life-threatening injuries, I would remove them from their vehicles if possible, so I could help them and figure out what caused the crash. Izumi kept scribbling answers to emergency scenarios until Present Mike called time, prompting everyone to set their pencils down as the staff collected exams. Hopefully I'll get into general education if I can't pass the practical, she thought glumly as she and the aspiring heroes were herded to their practical exams. Well, I'm screwed, Izumi muttered under her breath as she looks at the other students in her testing area. Through some miracle to make up for her rather crappy year, Bakugo Katsuki was not in her zone. But that was about as far as her luck went. Ida Tenya was over there in the corner, giving her the stink eye of righteousness as she walked to Uraraka. He skidded into her path, accusations already spilling out of his mouth. I will not let you interrupt our fellow test-takers' concentration, he said, his hands chopping wildly in the air. The girl stops, looking at her both past and future friend with a raised eyebrow. Why are you assuming that I'm going to be rude? Not waiting for an answer, she keeps going. I simply want to thank her for saving me from tripping before the exams began. Excuse me, she says politely, sidestepping Ida and walking up to Uraraka. Before the green-haired girl could get close enough to thank Uraraka, Present Mike screeched, "Go!" Izumi took off, leaving most of the other test-takers behind as she disappears into the fake city. Almost instantly she saw a three-pointer and ran at it, pulling out what looked like an ordinary pair of gloves from her pocket. She slips them on and sneaks up behind the three-pointer. There is SWCH. To turn these things off. Of course there is. Izumi hits the SWCH and jumped out of the way of the robot's collapse. I don't need these, she mutters as she stuffs the gloves back into her pocket. I can test them another day. She begins running through the buildings, deactivating the robots she finds hidden in the hallways and rooms, and getting shortcuts to the robots on the city's streets. She didn't know if it would count towards her score, but she sure hoped it did. Why else would there be suches on the robots? Izumi wasn't keeping track of how many robots she had taken out, but eventually she couldn't find any more. She was about to start looking through some of the other buildings before the ground began shaking and screams started coming from the other students. A shadow fell across the street, and Izumi looked up to see one of the largest robots she had ever seen in her entire life. And then she heard a familiar voice, and the green-haired girl looked down to the monstrosity's path. Uchako was stuck in some rubble, right in front of what Izumi identified as the zero-pointer. Swearing quietly under her breath, Izumi runs to the girl and starts pushing off chunks of debris. Hey, nice girl. Can you try to move of the rubble, starting from the top down? Uraraka looked confused and more than slightly nauseous. I can try, but the zero-pointer. Uraraka stared at the lump of metal helplessly. Izumi looked at it grimly. I'll try and stop it. Hey, what's your quirk? Izumi blurted out, desperately hoping she has the same quirk as she did in the other realities. Zero gravity, Uraraka grunted as she dislodged concrete chunks from on top of her legs with Izumi's help. Excellent. Can you nullify my gravity, please? Izumi asked coolly. I'm assuming it works on people, right? She looks to Uraraka for confirmation. The brunette stared at Izumi for a few seconds before nodding. Please be careful, crazy green-haired girl who I am not completely sure isn't a hallucination. Izumi saluted sarcastically. Yes, ma'am. Now? Uraraka smiles grimly and slapped her rescuer's leg with an outstretched hand. I've nearly got most of this rubble off, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to get out in time. The brunette said. Well, I'm off to kill the zero-pointer. Toodles, Izumi announced as she launched off the ground, pulling the previously abandoned gloves from her pocket back on. She ended up colliding with the chunk of metal's head? Whatever it was, Izumi smacked both hands onto its head and turned on the electronics woven throughout the gloves. A centralized electric charge fried what was essentially the robot's brain, and to top it off, Izumi stealthily sliced a few wires inside of it by opening up tiny gates inside of the structure. She had manually destroyed enough robots to see the internal structure didn't vary from model to model, so she didn't see any reason why the zero-pointer wouldn't be a scaled-up version of a pointed robot. Just before the bot began to fall back, away from Uraraka, The green-haired girl propelled herself towards a surrounding building. "Thank you, nice girl," Izumi screeched at the top of her lungs once they were both safely out of the zero-pointer's path. "Can you please deactivate your quirk?" Uraraka spotted Izumi and nods furiously. She clapped her hands together and whispered a word. What Izumi knew was release. The previously gravity-less girl thudded to the ground inside of one of the fake city's buildings as present mic and the automated voice announced the end of the practical exam. "I hope I got enough points to pass," Izumi whispered as she listened to the others chatter outside of the building. "I can't do the alternative." "Hey, green hair!" A voice yells from outside. "Are you all right?" Izumi pops up and leans out of the window. "Yeah, I'm fine," the girl called back. "Check on the girl who was caught in the debris in front of the zero-pointer." She looked around for Uraraka, becoming increasingly concerned until she saw her sitting down next to Recovery Girl. And Recovery Girl just saw Izumi. The healer just looked at Izumi and waved at her to come. Izumi sighed and looked down. She was in the second story of the building, and Recovery Girl might murder her if she jumped out of the window. Stares at us, then. That was so crazy. They took out the zero-pointer. I wonder what her quirk is. As Izumi stumbled to the triage center, Recovery Girl had acted in the middle of the now destroyed fake city. She heard the whispers of the other contestants. She had never felt comfortable in the center of attention, and she had taken measures to avoid it for most of her life. But now, there was nothing she could do to disappear other than the obvious, "Oh yes, time to go reality hopping." "Come here, dearie," Recovery Girl nearly yelled, waving her cane in the air. "Got it," Izumi ummed as she nearly face-planted on a piece of rubble. She reached the elderly woman's center, only to be smacked lightly on the face as energy gummies were shoved into her hand. "Here you go," the old woman chirped as she wetly kissed Izumi's cheek. The girl shuddered and wiped off her face with a dirty sleeve, quickly eating the gummies. She wished that Recovery Girl's quirk was different, like how it was in other universes. Able to heal with a song, or a certain word, or just her will and her hands. Giant kisses were kinda weird, to be honest. Recovery Girl?" the green-haired girl eventually asks. "What do I do now?" All of the others had left, barring those who were injured enough to need continued treatment at the nurse's office. "Go home and wait for your results," the heroine said severely. "You'll need sleep to recover the energy you've lost." "But go home," the older woman ordered. "Your health will be at risk if you don't." "Is that a threat? Time to test it out." I just want to see how that other girl is," Izumi wheedled. "The one who can cancel gravity?" Recovery Girl was not amused. "It's not any of your business, girl. She isn't hurt if that helps you any, but I won't tell you any more. Go home." Izumi pouts. "Fine. I need to thank her at some point, though. I hope we get in so I can." The elderly woman rolled her eyes. "With that display, I'm sure you'll both be fine. Now scoot." She punctuated the demand with a swat from her giant syringe. "Fine," the girl grumbles. "I'm going." "You might want to hurry, the gates close soon," Recovery Girl said nonchalantly. "Got it, bye." Izumi shrieked as she scrambled out of the testing site, relying on her memories of past testing ground layouts to guide her away. The gates slammed shut as soon as she stepped out, leaving the girl alone on the empty street. She paused and looked at the sky before hurrying home, hoping she had made it into you. Meanwhile, in the scoring center for the entrance exam, Nedzu was rather proud. His plan had worked perfectly, and although Midoriya hadn't displayed a visible quirk, she had done remarkably well. With over 50 points from the villains, and another 60 from helping the other contestant away from the debris she had been trapped in, the mysterious green-haired girl had earned her way into the 1A hero course. If only the other teachers would see it that way. How did she even get so many points? Someone muttered as the evaluators watched the video feeds of the girl's exam. Her gloves were registered as support items. Aizawa drawled from his seat in the corner. The others around him apparently thought he was sleeping, judging by the way they jumped, but that wasn't any of Nedzu's concern. The girl used them to their full capacity and mixed those with her physical abilities. The result left her near the top of the pack. Nedza beams as he pours himself a new cup of tea. Exactly. Additionally, she is here under supervision due to some previous interactions she and I have had. Does anyone object to her placement in 1A? Yes, someone says bluntly. Why the hell are all of the powerhouses going into 1A this year? 1B has some good contenders, but none on the scale that 1's kids are. Nedza sighed. He should have known Kan, homeroom teacher for 1B, would kick up a fuss. Do you need the answer? No, but I'd appreciate it, the silver-haired man hissed. Punk but little beach, Nedza muttered to himself before smiling benignly at Kansas. Several reasons, actually. First and foremost, Midoriya may have a quirk that none of us have seen. Aizawa has a quirk that nullifies quirks. He also has experience in helping students come to terms with and understanding their quirks when they have placed mental blocks on themselves. So why can't 1B have any of the other powerhouses? Nedzu resisted the urge to sigh at the question. Because all of those children have issues with their quirks. For some reason, Todoroki is using only half of his quirk, which is placing him in immediate medical danger. Yaoyorozu needs to learn how to effectively use her quirk so her body doesn't shut down on her. Bakugo obviously has anger issues as well as possible injuries due to his quirk's nature. This is only what had been immediately observed as well. Additionally, many of these students may be aiming to be underground heroes, which is something you are not. Nedzu takes a deep breath. So I would appreciate it if you did not further question my judgment. Understood? The teacher clenched his jaw. Perfectly, he ground out. But does anyone else have objections? Nedzu called to the rest of the room. Midnight raised a hand. It says in her files she's already past high school. The possible rodent grinned. Yes, it does. The heroine waited until it was clear Nedzu wouldn't continue. So why is she here? She finally asked. Nedza shrugged. Because she's interesting and I have possible blackmail? Midnight blinked. So, she's a student and we should treat her as such, despite what her records say? Exactly. The teachers look at her and shrug. It wasn't the oddest thing Nedzu had ever requested them to do. The weeks until the acceptance letters were sent out were spent in a haze by Izumi. She didn't want to be enrolled in UA, but at the same time, she didn't want the other option. And to top it all off, Korba wouldn't let her escape to anywhere else. Stupid friends who are your only barrier between you and incredible stupidity. When the letters finally arrived, Izumi tore her notice open and quickly read the note inside. Then she reread a line. And then reread it again and again and again, until the words hardly made sense anymore. You have been accepted into the Heroics course, Class 1A. She would get to see her friends. Wait, that isn't right. Izumi may know the people that her future classmates resemble, but she doesn't know them. It wouldn't be right or fair for her to treat them like they were the people she knew. She hasn't seen this Fumikage accept all parts of himself and come to love Dark Shadow like family. She hasn't seen this Tenya decide he's not living in the shadow of his family until the day he dies. She hasn't seen this Aizawa essentially adopt every child in her class, including Izumi herself. So until Izumi gets to know these new people, she will not act like she knows them, no matter how close she was to their counterparts. The day of truth, Izumi thought glumly as she stood in front of you, her backpack slung over her shoulders. She navigated the hallways by memory until she finally stood in front of the giant door that was the entrance to UA's classroom. Let's start My Hero Academia, she muttered bitterly before swinging the door open. There was a gaggle of girls talking in the back of the classroom, and a similar group towards the windows in the front. The classroom was pretty loud because of all of the chatter, but it seemed peaceful until a series of booms, pops, and cracks broke the silence. All Izumi could feel was remembered pain and the sounds of cruel laughter in her ears as her anchor, her gem, burned. She froze in the doorway and watched Bakugo Katsuki sneer at Ida, the fastest and quickest to care in the class, and wished that she had taken the other option. Even though she had known the temperamental blonde since childhood, seeing him now only filled her with dread. He had been so brave, albeit not kind in any definition of the word. Bakugo had been the ringleader of their neighborhood friends, but as soon as he got his quirk he turned it against anyone he deemed weaker than himself, which was everyone. Little fucker. Izumi skirted the edge of the classroom, picking a seat as far away from her childhood friend as she possibly could, praying that he hadn't noticed her. It apparently worked, because he was still beaching at Ida, or was it the other way around? Ida is trying in vain to stop himself from fully screeching at the other boy. The first infraction of the day? Bakugo had his feet on the desk and Ida had to stick up his butt about it. So the entire class was subjected to the unparalleled howling that was Ida Tenya trying to do what no one had yet succeeded doing, getting Bakugo Katsuki to act polite for once in his DMN life. Izumi had settled into her seat and had greeted the people already there, introducing herself and talking to a few people. No, Ashido was happy to introduce herself and others. Hagakure and Uraraka drifted up as time went on, but before anyone else could join them, the door creaked open and a thing squirmed in. No one else noticed it, apparently, but Izumi rushed back to her seat and sat down. She saw Aizawa's face emerge from the yellow mass to wearily stare at his new class, then stop and make eye contact with her as she stared right back at him. The green-haired girl's lips lifted into a bitter smile as she waved at her new teacher. If she had to be here against her will, she was going to try her hardest to make this fun.